Chapter 21. In the Tower Hamlets district of London's Isle of Dogs, between the ancient West India Docks and the Docklands district. The originally semi-abandoned Canary Wharf is in full swing, under construction. Near the dock, on the top floor of an inconspicuous 5-story building, the conference room was packed with wizards from more than 30 countries wearing different styles of wizard robes. Separated by a long walnut table, these people sat on 3-layer green leather sofas on both sides of the long table. At the end of the long table, there is a miniature statue of the Magical Brothers fountain in the British Ministry of Magic Hall, with 2 oath boxes guarding both sides of the statue. In view of the precedent of speakers from some countries throwing boots or corn cobs, all conference speakers must sign a contract before speaking and put it into a magically protected oath box to guarantee that they will abide by it. Meeting rules. In the middle of the long table was a magic typewriter that kept clicking, recording every word of the conference speakers. Standing behind the speaker's desk at the head of the long table, the person responsible for presiding over this meeting is the current British Minister of Magic, Millicent Barnold. Unlike the Muggle Temple, which has fully proved that it has changed from the sun never sets to the sun never sets through a series of events such as the Cod War and the Suez Canal dispute, the British Ministry of Magic still has the leading brother of the wizarding world, the throne. Therefore, Millicent Barnold was undoubtedly elected as the host of this international conference. She asked the representatives of wizards from various countries sitting on the 3-tiered sofas on both sides to stand up and speak one by one, and firmly controlled the various countries. Representative speaking time. Okay, Mr. Eisenberg. Regarding the 23 points put forward by Mr. Samuel Cohog of Macusa, I think everyone has fully understood its spirit. You can sit down and listen to our consultants. Instructions provided. As she spoke, the lady wearing a purple authentic London-style wizard's robe pushed up the monocle on her nose, and then waved her pearl-white poplar wand. Dozens of parchment reports with the same content were summoned from the filing cabinet and flew accurately to all the participants present. Professor Slughorn, you can speak now. As a potion master, you must have unique opinions on the standardization of cross-border potion trade. We look forward to you answering our questions like you did at Hogwarts. Horace Slughorn immediately stood up, took off his bowler hat, took off his hat to everyone around him, and then began to explain. He first praised the host of the meeting, Ms. Barnold. Your levitation spell is still impressive. I remember that with your flexible use of this spell, you alone added 100% to Ravenclaw Academy. A lot of points. While Millicent smiled, Horace continued, and just like what Minister Barnold did back then, using a magic spell for different purposes, the effect it shows seems to be, but it's like there are many different kinds of magic potions. Many of the finished potions currently circulating among countries have similar situations. For example, the medicine Sheng Guling is generally used to treat human bone diseases in the UK. On the Rue Pythia in Paris, the store that sells the most bone spirits is a tool store that specializes in supplying magical animal farms. Most of those who buy bone spirits are operators of unicorn breeding farms. They can usually harvest 2 to 3 times a year, instead of just collecting unicorns once a year according to traditional techniques like ours. You are slandering. The horns of our unicorns from France are as good as those from England. No, ours are better. A French representative, wearing red high heels and white stockings, stood up and protested loudly. As he spoke, the wig on his head was still trembling, almost as if it didn't fall off. There is no overnight feud between Britain and France. This is usually the case. If they disagree, they will roll up their sleeves on the spot. Horace raised his hand in a standard French military salute. Millicent Barnold, who was presiding over the meeting, received the signal and immediately waved her wand to let several orators enter the venue. She took the somewhat excited French representatives out for a drink of English wine. Afternoon tea. I'm sorry. I'm just discussing the matter and have no intention of discussing the origin of potion materials and their quality. As one of the 20,8 pure blood families, each family has its own fundamentals, and each family has interests that they do not want others to interfere with. The ass decides the head. No matter how public-minded he was, Horace had to step on his colleagues when he spoke, not to mention that the other party was French. Of course, this is what Millicent Barnold expects to see, because it is also in the interest of the British Ministry of Magic. French potion manufacturers will not contribute tax revenue to the British Ministry of Magic. However, what I want to say is, as a stable potion that has been invented for hundreds of years, the ingredient list and brewing method can hardly be optimized or changed, just because of different uses. The British and French the Sheng Guling will be labeled with different labels, and the selling prices of the two medicines will also be different. This is the problem we must face up to now, and the Shenguling is by no means an isolated case, similar. Just when Horace wanted to further state his point of view, a snowy owl suddenly flew out of the window of this 5-story building from a distance and wanted to fly into the conference room. On the windowsill next to it, a house elf with an anxious expression was also patting the glass anxiously. The Aurors responsible for the security of the venue immediately took action. They picked up the owls and house elves, and after confirming that there were no traces of dark magic, they sent them all into the conference room. The Auror captain, wearing prosthetic eyeballs, a cape, and a thick cane, limped up to Horace. "What's wrong?" "Alastair. Professor Slughorn, your house elf Momo has brought a message. She is now outside for inspection and verification. The content of the message is..." Mad-Eye Moody had just said a few words when a roar that was almost like a scream sounded from the conference seat. "How dare that villain do this? This is a massacre of wizards, this is a rebellion of goblins, this is a serious dereliction of duty by the Ministry of Magic." Just as Moody personally informed Slughorn, an Auror went to inform Lucius Malfoy, who was also attending the meeting. As an antique from some magic potion shop, he was also qualified to attend this international conference. However, at this time, Lucius stood up and jumped around shouting curses as if he had lost his mind, without any regard for the so-called aristocratic etiquette that the Malfoy family always valued most. "Silence! Mr. Malfoy! You have to remember where you are, and you have to be responsible for what you say." Millicent Barnold pointed the wand at her neck with a displeased look on her face, cast a loud voice spell, and restored order on the scene with force. Just when Mad-Eye Moody was about to hear the minister's order, he immediately rushed over and gave the Death Eater who had previously escaped punishment with the golden bullet trick a powerful spell, and then gave him another one. When asking for a one-way ticket to Azkaban, Horace also walked towards the speaker's desk with a frosty face. Because he was concerned about the face of the minister and the British Ministry of Magic, he reminded in a low voice but gritted teeth, "Millicent, now is not the time to pursue Mr. Malfoy. I suggest you adjourn the meeting temporarily." Chapter 22. Two flowers bloom, one branch each. While the Aurors and strikers from the Ministry of Magic were out in full force, the people in the Hermitage Manor were not idle either. Faced with the goblin who dared to call himself Emperor, Bourne decided to directly communicate with him physically using the chain sword. Narlock was so frightened that he kept greeting Sherlock and asking him why he wanted to raise a crazy hybrid giant at home. Sherlock is also confused. However, curiosity prevailed after all, and Sherlock, the man in the painting, couldn't help but ask Bourne, "Who are you?" "Me." Bourne replied without looking back, "I'm just an ordinary death angel under the throne." As he spoke, he passed through the hall of the manor like the wind, using his chain sword to tear apart the sofas, tables, chairs, and benches that stood in front of him, as well as several people who rushed towards him under Narlock's orders. Voodoo bearer. Their bodies as hard as dry wood were cut through by the chain sword as easily as a wallpaper knife cut through paper. Moreover, Bourne's swordsmanship is all about one sword, without any sloppiness. "Come on, people. Whoever can kill this hybrid giant, I will reward him with 300 pots, note 1, plus $20,000 in Muggle currency." As Narlock ran, he shouted to the goblin men and several purifier mercenaries who had just arrived. The exchange between drow pots and Muggle currencies is managed much more strictly by the Magical Congress of the United States than by the British Ministry of Magic, and wizards basically have no need to exchange drow pots for US knives. For the descendants of the purifiers who actually lived in Muggle society most of their lives, the US knife was more useful and practical than the treble. The reason why these descendants of the purifiers are willing to serve as Narlock's subordinates is simply because the goblin gives them a lot of money. If they are willing to pay more, they will work harder. Therefore, when Narlock bid a good price, all these people's enthusiasm was mobilized. Ignoring their companions who were killed by headshots, and the voodoo bearers whose heads were beheaded by chain swords, they raised the Glock in their hands, aimed at the dangerous hybrid giant and pulled the trigger. Bang, bang, bang. Adhering to the habits brought from the United States, and because these descendants of the purgers rushed to the UK in a hurry, they only obtained some pistols from the black market as weapons, so they all chose to empty the magazines at once in order to use them. The number of bullets makes up for the lack of power. Normally, when faced with a muggle's hot weapon head-on, the safest way for a wizard to protect himself is to cast an iron armor charm on himself. However, Bourne has never learned the iron armor curse. Moreover, you can't expect a little wizard who hasn't gone to school to be proficient in the silent and wandless spell casting technique of this kind of spell, right? That's a requirement only for aura elites. Therefore, facing the bullets fired by the enemy, Bourne can only use his old methods to deal with them. Just like grabbing a chicken, he reached out and grabbed a voodoo bearer whose head had just been beheaded, and used it as a shield to cover all the vital points on the front of the body. Then, while quickly approaching the enemy, he kept kicking out green plants, sofas, and other things placed in the entrance hall to provide himself with some extra cover. As for the bullets that were not blocked, as long as they were not aimed at vital parts of the body, Bourne simply ignored them. Even if the bullets of backward kinetic energy weapons like pistols are lucky enough to penetrate the skin of an Astartes, the black carapace implanted under the skin will be directly ejected, and they will not be able to touch their steel cables of muscle fibers. Even those broken skin areas will heal quickly and form invisible scars under the action of Laminra cells. Seeing Bourne rushing over like a running rhinoceros, the wise man among the Purifier mercenaries immediately warned his companions, "Take cover. Reload. Prepare to fight." However, he still underestimated how terrifying an Astartes could be. With just one punch, Bourne punched through a red brick pillar in the entrance hall of the Hermit Manor, and caught the smart man who had found a bunker in advance and was quickly changing the magazine. 5 fingers as powerful as hydraulic pliers squeezed his neck hard. At the same time, Bourne's chain sword also came out. Like a javelin, it penetrated directly through the chests of the remaining 4 descendants of the Purifiers who were standing closer and had not had time to find cover, and finally penetrated into the wall of the foyer. Reloading, fighting. It is almost impossible for the Astartes to launch an assault at close range, giving the enemy a chance to do so. Until this time, all the mercenaries who had followed Narlock back to England had been slaughtered by Bourne. Although he said so much, in fact, only 2 or 3 minutes had passed since Bourne smashed the glass dome in the entrance hall and fell from the sky to the entrance hall. This is the combat efficiency of the Astartes. Even in the chaotic dark millennium, the heretics and aliens ravaging the galaxy did not dare to underestimate any Astartes. It's a pity that in the peaceful world of Harry Potter, people have not heard of the legend of the Astartes. As a result, although Bourne has killed an entire team of Purifier mercenaries like chopping melons and vegetables, some guys still have the illusion that I can do it. For example, the 2 goblins who came with Narlock. It is a bit far-fetched to say that they are goblins. They are actually Pucky from North America, a distant relative of European goblins. They are also small, have pointed ears, and dislike humans, especially wizards. Compared to European goblins, North American goblins like Pucky are more savage in nature, but also more heroic. In particular, they are particularly good at using toxins, and the poison-quenching weapons used by Pucky are all astonishingly lethal, capable of sealing the throat with blood. When they saw that Bourne had finished dealing with the Purifier mercenaries and had no weapons in their hands, the 2 American goblins immediately became energetic, took out the knives in their pockets and rushed over. The advantage is mine. Both Pucky thought so. Because in their opinion, as long as they can make a small wound, the poison alone can bring down this hybrid giant. But the actual situation is that these 2 ignorant Pucky completely underestimated the danger level of Bourne. Even with bare hands, even without armor, the Astartes are still terrifying killers. Facing the 2 guys who rushed up to forcibly give away, Bourne just opened his mouth and spat at them. Of course, this is not a mockery. Surgically modified space marines have a pair of Beckel's glands implanted in their lower lip next to their salivary glands or in their hard palate. This gland works much like many poisonous insects, it synthesizes and stores deadly venom. Due to the implantation of Beckel's glands, space marines are immune to the toxins they secrete. At the same time, the toxin they secrete is also extremely corrosive. A space warrior who was imprisoned and placed in an iron prison could bite through the iron bars and escape in just a few minutes. Bourne, who has been wandering in the dark universe all year round, has also learned another technique to use this venom, spitting out of his mouth, driven by strong airflow pumped by multiple lungs, with a speed comparable to that of a sonic bullet. The speed hit the 2 Pukikis' faces. They were knocked unconscious immediately. This was not a bad luck. Although the final result was to be poisoned to death, at least they did not need to feel the pain of their faces gradually melting while they were awake. At this time, Narlock was almost running out of the foyer of the Hermit Manor. There was a van parked in the garden of the manor. Just when the goblin was jumping anxiously and reaching out to open the car door, Bourne had already taken off the still roaring chain sword from the wall, waved a sword flower, and cut the flesh and blood between the saw teeth. "Shake off the residue," Heresy, accept your judgment, Bourne roared, making the shattered glass ceiling of the foyer tremble. But just when he was about to take steps to chase Narlock, a strange situation suddenly happened. The hooded wizard whom he had shot 3 times with magnum bullets suddenly sat up from the ground. Imperio! Accompanied by a high-pitched incantation, a dark green light instantly passed through the messy entrance hall and hit Bourne, who was several meters away from the wizard. While he continued to cast spells with his wand, he took off his hood and used it to cover the bullet holes on his torso that were still bleeding. Bourne, who was attacked by him, stood there, the expression on his face gradually turned ferocious, as if he was fighting against something. Narag! The wizard called the elf with difficulty, this time, you have to pay more. Hearing the shout and seeing Bourne who was hit by the spell, the goblin Narlock was stunned for a moment, and then burst into laughter. Add. Say important things 3 times. Note, DRO cauldron, equivalent to the gold galleons used by British wizards, but the Macusa has a treasure and DRO cauldron manager position, rather than being completely managed by Gringotts like the UK. Chapter 23. The sudden change between great sorrow and great joy almost caused the old goblin to have a myocardial infarction. He took out a bottle of magic potion from his pocket and took a sip. Only then did Narlock take a breath. At the same time, he also felt that his previous decision to hire this wild wizard at a great cost was extremely wise. Sure enough, you get what you pay for. Instead of hiring the descendants of the purifiers, it would be better to just spend a lot of money to hire wizards. Even a wild wizard is more capable than those descendants of muggles and squibs. It was a pity that he didn't say this idea out loud. Otherwise, the wizard he had always regarded as a wild wizard would definitely send greetings to his family. You are the wild wizard. Your whole family is a wild wizard. You know, he is a genuine graduate of Hogwarts, and he almost got the chance to go to Azkaban for further study. He is a senior Death Eater. If it hadn't been for the Ministry of Magic's large-scale hunt for Death Eaters after the Dark Lord's fall, how could he have gone to the other side of the sea, a wild place in the eyes of the 3 flags of old Europe, and disguised himself as a wild wizard? At the same time, if he didn't have to prove his identity if he wanted to withdraw money from Gringotts' treasury, why would he hold his nose and let a lowly goblin do it for a few golden pots? Avery, where did this hybrid giant come from? The wizard has an impressive hooked nose on his face, and has some terrible black magic spells tattooed all over his face. The key is that he also has a shaved head. After hearing Narlock's order, he glanced at the cheap boss without any trace, and then climbed up from the ground with difficulty. Thanks to the years he spent serving the Dark Lord, he learned a skill from him, and was able to add a simplified version of the iron armor curse to himself in time when Bourne drew his gun and shot him. Otherwise, he would have died just now. However, the armor curse was only a simplified version after all. Even if it saved him from death due to headshots and torso explosion, the magnum bullets still hit his chest and stomach. After finishing this job and returning to the United States, he will need a lot of money while recovering from his injuries. Damn goblin! Avery cursed mentally. However, on the surface, he still obeyed the boss's order. With a flick of his wrist, he strengthened some of the Soul Imperious curses that were being continuously output. Who are you? Avery asked. I am the Emperor's Angel of Death. Bourne replied. Avery was confused, so he continued to ask, Angel? Is the Emperor you are talking about a false god worshipped by giants? Because he didn't study the history of magic properly when he was in school, or to be more precise, there were not many young wizards at Hogwarts who had studied the history of magic properly, so Avery thought that Bourne's Emperor is a superstition of giants. False god. Although he was temporarily controlled by the Imperious curse, how could Asterius Astartes hear someone use this word to describe the All-Father? Whether the Emperor is a god or not is a matter of whether he wants it or not. But no matter what his choice is, pseudo is a taboo word. The violent fluctuations in emotions allowed Bourne, who had already tried to break free from the Imperious curse, to regain some of his self-judgment in his brain, but it was not fully restored. At this time, his eyes had turned red. By coincidence, Avery reveals his true appearance after taking off his hood, a hooked nose, bald head and spell tattoos. I have to say, this coincidence is too good. Therefore, in Bourne's eyes, the image of the wizard Avery gradually overlapped with that of a certain person. False gods. The first person who dared to slander the Emperor was not even the 4 vendors and the demons under their command, but the instigator of the Horus Heresy, which cut off mankind's great conquest of the stars and seas, and allowed tens of billions a bastard of bastards, a bastard of bastards, a bastard of bastards, and a bastard of bastards, Erebus. In the Warhammer universe, find any loyalist Astartes and ask him a question: if a bolter only had 2 bullets, and you had Fulgrim, Horus and Erebus in front of you, what would you choose? How to do it? The standard answer you get will most likely be, hit Erebus with 2 bullets, and then smash the bolter into the guy's face. Speaking more broadly, Erebus is a being despised by almost every Astartes chapter. Although this guy looks humane, he perfectly avoids all human morality. To put it mildly, Erebus must be responsible for more than half of the reason why Bourne went through 300 years of hard life. If given the chance to exact revenge on Erebus, 90,9 Space Marines out of 100 would be willing to risk their lives, without hesitation, just to kill this bastard. Bourne is no exception. The anger was like hot lava, instantly igniting every nerve in him, and strong discharges stimulating every synapse in him. Heretics! Die! He roared like a violent wind, raised his weapon and rushed towards Avery. The loyal chainsword seemed to feel the anger of its master, and then roared louder. The wizard was so frightened that he quickly used the unforgivable curse again. Because the imperious curse failed, he only had 2 choices left: the Cruciatus curse and the death curse. Comparing the two, the spell of Avada chewing a big melon has more syllables after all, and the current situation is extremely urgent. Therefore, he can only use the one with the shorter syllable. Crucio. Accompanied by a sharp and piercing cry, a green electric light emerged from his wand, like a weird whip, lashing towards Bourne. The severe pain caused by the Cruciatus curse is at the soul level. Generally speaking, one Cruciatus curse is enough to cause pain that exceeds the human's tolerance threshold for pain. In his opinion, even if the middle-class hybrid giant in front of him has good resistance to curses, he will still be in immediate pain after being hit by the Cruciatus curse, which is equivalent to interrupting the skill. At that time, he would have enough time to use other black magic methods to defeat this opponent. However, the fact is that even though he was hit by a heart-breaking bone, Bourne only frowned and didn't even stop. Just kidding, can the pain that exceeds the threshold of endurance for mortals be comparable to the pain that the Astartes experienced? Not to mention, when undergoing transformation surgery, because the anesthesia cannot take effect, you have to stay awake to endure the transformation process of flesh and blood, which lasts for more than 10 days or even months. Just after becoming an Astartes, every Astartes will always be injured on the battlefield, right? After being injured, there is always a chance to get treatment from a pharmacist, right? Look at the equipment carried by those chapter apothecaries: micro drills capable of drilling through power armor and the black carapace of Space Marines, hydraulic power pliers, plasma cauterization, and suturing equipment. Every treatment, from a certain perspective, is actually equivalent to experiencing a heartbreaking physical experience. With more than 300 years of combat experience, Bourne has had contact with the pharmacist brothers of many battle groups, and has become familiar with many different styles and characteristics of treatment methods. The physical heartbreaking and bone cutting was just a small scene. He had long been numb, well, he was used to it. Chapter 24. In the Hermit Manor, because of a soul-stealing curse, the young wizard Bourne briefly started a maniacal mincemeat killing spree. Outside the hidden manor, a large group of adult wizards were almost bewildered because they were working overtime. UK? Work overtime? Listen, does it sound right? In a country with a tradition of drinking tea first, the emergence of overtime is actually quite sudden. But the reality is that in order to use the exclusion method proposed by Dumbledore to find the manor hidden by the Fidelity Curse, not only the Auror Office of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement was almost mobilized, but also many people from other departments were mobilized. Help! For example, in the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters, many salary thieves who usually only need to drink tea, read newspapers, and occasionally go out to clean up some Muggle memories have also been deployed to participate in the operation. However, no matter how much they have opinions, these people can only hold back their words. Because their immediate boss, the director of the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters, is also working overtime with them. Moreover, this man often makes wise words. It doesn't matter if young people work overtime. If you don't endure hardship now, you will have to eat dirt when you get old. There is no limit to one's skills. Master Dumbledore is participating in this operation. This is a valuable learning opportunity for you. I see all your efforts. Believe in yourself and you will be able to overcome the hardships and complete the task. Workers have a working spirit. Working as part-timers will definitely make them a master. Even the well-informed Dumbledore couldn't help but feel sad when he saw this wizard bureaucrat, who was about 50 years old, wearing a brown pinstriped suit, a bright red tie, and a pair of pointed boots. Feeling, there are still capable people in the Ministry of Magic. This director named Cornelius Fudge left a deep impression on the White Wizard Dumbledore in a special way. But no matter how you say it, Cornelius Fudge's pua to the staff did have a positive motivating effect. After nearly 100 wizards searched, someone finally found a key clue beyond expectations. An Auror named Kingsley Shacklebolt found a house elf near a Muggle village that was not supposed to be there. And when Kingsley discovered this house elf, he was actually driving a Muggle van and running wildly across the road. There must be a demon in the abnormal situation. Kingsley decisively subdued him with a magic spell, and then searched the car. With the help of the Tracer Appearance spell, Kingsley saw the image fragment of the previous passenger in the carriage, and recognized the conspicuous suspect goblin at a glance. Wizards would obviously show no mercy to a house elf who was suspected of participating in criminal activities and endangering the safety of more than a dozen young wizards. Many parents of pure-blood wizards suggested that the Ministry of Magic should immediately authorize the use of torture spells on them in order to obtain information as soon as possible. In the end, Dumbledore, who had a higher moral standard, defied all opinions and used the gentler method of veritaserum and legilimency to pry open the elf's brain. "Who is your master?" "I have no master, only a boss." "Then who's your boss?" "Naruk, a stingy elf." After confirming the basic information, Dumbledore used his wand to pick out a ball of silver thread from the house elf's temple. Since he didn't have any props like a pensieve at hand, he had no way to show the images in the elf's memory to others present. He could only interpret them himself. The silver-white thread, stirred by the wand, burrowed into Dumbledore's temple like an earthworm. The old wizard closed his eyes. Sheffield Village, ash forest, gorse bushes, cobblestone paths. He quickly reported some of the scenes he saw. Those scenes were the house elf's memories of the location of the Hermit Manor. After a few seconds, the old principal opened his eyes again. "Map." Someone immediately sent over a local map, and Dumbledore pointed to a location on it with his wand. "The manor hidden by the loyalty curse is here." After saying that, without waiting for anyone to react, Dumbledore shouted, "Fox!" A pillar of fire rose from the spot, and the old wizard disappeared immediately, leaving only a small patch of lawn on the ground that had been scorched by the flames and turned into a bald spot. Kingsley Shacklebolt, a tall black wizard with gold earrings on his ears, tilted his head and whispered to the Mad Eye beside him, "It may not be appropriate to say this now, but you must admit that Dumbledore is here. It does look very stylish when you cast it." Moody didn't turn his head, he just turned his fake magic eyeball half a circle and glanced at this junior. "Maybe," he replied. However, there were still some words that Moody did not say on the spot, "But why do I feel that Dumbledore is a little anxious? What happened?" At dusk, the Hermitage Manor seemed quiet, and Dumbledore's figure appeared in the middle of a row of corridors guarded by privet trees. In the bushes on both sides of the road, golden gorse flowers bloomed, as well as some newly sprouted heather. However, this peaceful atmosphere made Dumbledore feel a little uneasy. He smelled a slightly pungent smell of gunpowder smoke in the air, as well as an imperceptible smell of blood. He gently tapped the wizard's robe with his wand, and the spell covered his body silently but quickly like ripples on the water. Passing through the corridor in the garden, Dumbledore immediately saw the typical Elizabethan foyer composed of several straight white marble columns and glass, and then the old wizard walked in quickly. As they walked, Dumbledore said in a gentle tone, "Little Bourne, don't be afraid. I'm coming in. You know me. I'm a good friend of your Grandpa Horace. I'm..." "Hello. Grandpa Albus." Sitting on a carved chest of drawers that had rarely survived in the room, Bourne swung his feet that could not reach the ground while shaking his arms and greeted Dumbledore warmly. After finishing speaking, he also introduced Sherlock in the Rubik's Cube portrait that was erected on the back of the sofa that was broken into two parts in front of him. "Mr. Holmes, this old man is a friend of my grandfather. His name is Albus." Dumbledore. And not far around them, corpses were lying on the ground, including one corpse that had been smashed by Bourne, who was in a daze, so that the human shape was almost unrecognizable. "Just now we made a bet on who would find this place first. You guessed it would be either the Auror from the Ministry of Magic or my grandfather Horace. Now it seems that your reasoning is not as good as my intuition." Bourne smiled with Sherlock said. In the portrait, the character well suddenly appeared on Sherlock's forehead, and there were a few more black lines next to it. Mr. Slughorn, I am just a magical portrait now. If I were still alive, my deduction method would definitely be comparable to your wizard intuition. Even after experiencing a thrill, his talking skills have not diminished yet. Moreover, this person is not like ordinary people who have so many fears about Bourne, who shows the terrifying ability to act violence. He has the ability to achieve violence, but he is not a pervert with violent tendencies. This is like having nuclear weapons but not being able to do so. A principle must be used. In his opinion, the kid Bourne is quite interesting. It's a pity that the other party is not a descendant of the Holmes family. Because they see each other in the eye, Sherlock is obviously on the same page with Bourne, who helped him and Watson solve the trouble and also protected the other young wizards in the manor. Not one way. But I am still willing to admit defeat. Shylock said clearly, I am willing to testify for you and prove the validity of Narlock's last will and testament. I also gave you the golden crown, just as this the honorary crown of this summer camp activity, provided that you don't let other goblins hear about it. After saying that, Sherlock winked at Bourne. Bourne nodded excitedly. He was already imagining how many alchemy materials he could buy after getting the money from the goblin Narlock, and how many useful tools produced by muggles he could buy. And with these things, it's not too much to upgrade the loyal chainsword, right? It wouldn't be too much to add a bolter, right? As an Astartes, does it sound very reasonable to buy yourself a set of power armor? Just as Bourne was thinking about it, tears of happiness were about to flow from the corners of his mouth. Dumbledore coughed twice and interrupted his reverie. I have to interrupt, he said. Should you explain to me, an old man, what exactly is going on here? And you have to speak faster. The people from the Ministry of Magic and other young wizards, our parents, are coming soon, and I think the scene here needs to be somewhat covered up. Chapter 25. Professional matters should naturally be left to professionals. Sherlock in the portrait explained the whole incident clearly in just a few minutes. At the same time, Mr. Sherlock also emphasized emphatically and solemnly, it was the dark wizard who used the unforgivable curse, which caused Bourne to go berserk, and as the instigator, he became a puddle of mud. I can't imagine what a bad guy that guy is. His end is entirely his own fault and he has no complaints against anyone else. Not only did he use the unforgivable curse, he used it twice in a row. If I remember correctly, when I was still alive, the Ministry of Magic stipulated that anyone who used the unforgivable curse once would be imprisoned in Azkaban. Anyone who uses a wizard twice or more will be sentenced to death and executed immediately. Sherlock's righteous and biased speech made Bourne call him good guy in his heart, and all he had to do was shout 666 to him. That's right, I swear, that guy did it first. Bourne nodded in agreement like he was pecking at rice. After hearing the cause and effect, Dumbledore pondered for a moment before speaking. While I trust Mr. Holmes' integrity, I still want to conduct some checks on you, Bourne. But don't worry, I just want to check if the person's Imperious Curse and Cruciatus Curse have left any sequelae. Bourne blinked. Not afraid at all. However, no matter how he waited, Dumbledore didn't make any move for more than a minute. So, with a puzzled look on his face, he asked, Grandpa Albus, didn't you say that time is pressing? You want to check it out? However, Dumbledore showed a kind smile on his face and said, I have checked it, there is nothing wrong. Although his words were calm, in fact, the most powerful white wizard in the world may not be as relaxed as he said. Because just now, Dumbledore had used legilimency to secretly probe Bourne's mind, but what he felt shocked and confused him. How is this going? Originally, he had prepared for the worst. Even if Bourne was still controlled by the Imperious Curse cast by the Dark Wizard, he was not completely unable to accept it. But the moment he came into contact with Bourne's heart, he still felt a darkness and depression that was difficult to describe in words. Moreover, this sense of oppression was like a huge boulder, which even made him feel unable to breathe. Can the Imperious Curse still have this effect? Why didn't he know? Although he is a well-known master of white magic, Dumbledore is actually no stranger to black magic. He just didn't bother to use it. As for the 3 unforgivable curses sought after by many dark wizards, Dumbledore knew them more thoroughly than all the dark wizards put together. He didn't think that the dark wizard who cast the Imperious Curse on Bourne could study the spell to the point where he couldn't even understand it. If that guy was really that capable, he would have to work for a goblin. But just when he wanted to use more powerful means to completely reveal the secret deep in Bourne's heart, he saw a dazzling golden light suddenly burst out from the bottom of Bourne's heart, like a supernova explosion. Moreover, this golden light also followed the legilimency spell linking him and Bourne, directly shining into Dumbledore's mind. This light is full of divine aura, but at the same time it also has a majesty that cannot be touched or presumed upon. Dumbledore's wizarding intuition told him that he must not offend him, otherwise it would definitely cause a disaster. At the same time, his hand holding the wand also felt a slight tingling. The Elder Wand, one of the three hallows of death, was actually feeling fear. The Elder Wand's body actually released a weak electric current, and it seemed to want to. This is a way to remind your master. If you want to commit suicide, go alone and don't take me with you. Merlin's beard. Beneath his calm appearance, Dumbledore's heart was actually filled with turmoil. He was even more curious about Bourne. However, what he wanted to say turned out to be, "You seem to have mastered the transformation of Magus quite well and can retract it freely. I feel relieved. After all, Bourne, you will come to Hogwarts next September. For a child of your age, going to school is a big deal and must not be delayed. If you want to explore the secrets, there will be many opportunities in the future." Reason told Dumbledore that there was no need to rush for a moment. When people are anxious, they are prone to chaos, and some of the consequences of chaos are irreversible. He has learned this lesson before. It hurts too much. A girl's face flashed in Dumbledore's mind involuntarily. He thought of Ariana, his youngest sister. It took about 5 or 6 minutes of delay before Dumbledore waved his wand and uttered a spell. Reparo. Repaired as new. As Dumbledore waved his magic wand like a conductor, the shattered Hermitage Manor miraculously came to life. The broken furniture jumped back to its original position one by one, the various decorations on the wall returned to their original shape in mid-air, the cotton went back into the cushions, the broken glass dome automatically repaired, and the broken glass on the floor glittered. They flew back to their original positions and stuck together. A large number of broken silver picture frames flew to the side of Sherlock's self-portrait and were spliced together with a crunch, becoming as bright as new again. All the damaged, torn, and gaping parts of the room were restored to their original appearance. The bloodstains on the floor and walls were automatically wiped clean. Even the broken saw teeth of the chain sword returned to their original positions. The flattened bullet heads emerged from the corpses on the ground, and then were restuffed into the brass cartridge cases that had been emptied of propellant. Is it so amazing? Bourne's eyes lit up, and he remembered a similar scene in the Harry Potter movie. However, it's definitely not as impressive as experiencing it in person through a screen. As if he had thought of something, Bourne picked up the oversized revolver with both hands, opened the magazine with force, poured out a magnum bullet, and tossed it lightly. Well, the charge inside is still gone. It may be because the gunpowder has been turned into energy and dissipated, so the spell cannot be reversed. But in any case, the repair spell can indeed work wonders in some cases. So, he made up his mind to learn this spell as soon as possible. Shortly after Dumbledore finished casting the spell, noisy voices were heard outside the manor. In order to prevent the gangsters inside from using apparition to escape, to be honest, this is really looking down on Narlach and the others. The people in the Aura office have placed anti-apparition spells around the manor. Therefore, except for Dumbledore who had the help of Phoenix Fox, it took these people so long to get to the Hermitage Manor. Aurors and beaters, plus a group of parents of pure-blood young wizards, rushed in. No matter what Rufus Scrimgeour, the head of the Aura office, tried to persuade, the anxious parents were unwilling to wait even 1 second longer. Chapter 26. Charing Cross Road, Westminster District, London, around 8 p.m., there are not many pedestrians wandering around this road known for its many bookstores. Between a second-hand bookstore called Emergency Shop and a record store whose signboard has mostly fallen off, there is a small and shabby tavern. It is filled with the sound of people drinking, and it is still overcrowded. Drink it! Drink it! Drink it! Accompanied by the commotion of people raising rice, the man sitting in front of the bar held an oak cup that had been rubbed with pulp by his predecessors, raising his head and pouring wine into his mouth desperately. After holding on for more than 20 seconds and downing about half a pint of liquid, the man finally couldn't hold on any longer, tilted his head and vomited out the contents of his stomach with a U sound. Alas! Woo! You! His move was met with boos. Only the tavern owner was very happy. He stood behind the bar and wiped the glass with a rag while announcing loudly, "The 123rd Tasting Challenge competition of the Leaky Cauldron is over. The last challenger also failed. No one can drink it in one breath. Next bottle of Gamp's vintage social wine. After saying that, he tapped the bar with his fingers again. The challenger, who felt relieved after vomiting it out, had no choice but to rummage through his wallet unwillingly, leaving 2 galleons behind, and then ran out in dejection amidst the ridicule of others. Old Tom, the owner of the tavern, picked up the gold galleons with a smile, weighed the weight, blew it to his ear and listened, and then safely threw them into the cash box under the bar. Another beautiful day. Old Tom was in a very beautiful mood at this time. Not counting normal business income, he earned more than 100 galleons today just from holding the tasting challenge, which is almost as much as an aura earns in a month. How could he not make Old Tom heartbroken? Happy? Old Tom's full name is Thomson Linford Abbott. People who know him well call him Old Tom, and the tavern he runs is the famous Leaky Cauldron Tavern. As for the Gamp social wine he used for today's competition, it was made by the First Minister of the British Ministry of Magic, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, including the Office for the Prohibition of the Abuse of Magic, the Auror Command, the Wiesengamot Management Agency and other subordinate agencies, a special flavored drink brewed by Ulrich Gamp, the founder of the Ministry of Magic, the largest and most staffed department in the Ministry of Magic. The biggest characteristic of this kind of wine is that it is difficult to drink. Ulrich Gamp even left a special fund. Anyone who challenges and succeeds in drinking a bottle of Gamp's old social wine in one sitting can receive 100 gold galleons from Gringotts. However, no one has succeeded in this challenge so far. On the contrary, his descendants, such as Old Tom who runs the Leaky Cauldron, can earn a very stable income every year by relying on this traditional challenge. Isn't it just eating the food of ancestors? Not mixed with cold. Don't you see, the extremely rich Malfoy has been living on the money he brought Emperor William into the country for hundreds of years? However, in the wizarding circle, the most popular topic about wealth and inheritance is no longer old money like Malfoy or Black. Almost all British wizards learned from an article published in the Daily Prophet last year that an extremely mysterious and lucky little wizard inherited an astonishing amount of inheritance. It was said that the money came from the American branch of Gringotts, and those greedy goblins almost got into a fight over this matter. Of course, they did not dare to deny the validity of this inheritance, because that would be provoking the authority of the Ministry of Magic. The goblins were simply arguing over one issue: should the money have to be transferred from Gringotts Americas to the London headquarters? Regarding this issue, there were 3 rounds of closed-door talks between the 2 groups of goblins within Gringotts. After every conversation, a few goblin bankers always had to be carried on stretchers and sent to the hospital, while most of the others had bruises and swollen faces and disheveled clothes. After that, the British Ministry of Magic came forward, and the Wiesengamot sages also expressed dissatisfaction. The combination of the 2 subdued those goblins who were blinded by money. Finally, the Ministry of Magic selected some capable personnel composed of Aurors and Strikers, and cooperated with the Macusa team of Righteous Masters, and then the money was safely escorted to London and deposited in the deepest part of Gringotts. In the vault. Although the report has been published for more than a year, the popularity of this topic has not diminished. People still talk about the amount of money and the lucky little wizard who received the inheritance. This is actually quite normal. After all, there are less than 20,000 wizards in the UK who can survive. With such a large circle, there are naturally fewer news worthy of topicality. Didn't you see that in order to survive, the Daily Prophet can only publish some alarmist stories or fabricated fake news? It finally published real news, and it happened to be something related to galleons that almost everyone was concerned about. It would be strange if this still failed to arouse widespread discussion and sustained attention. However, while most people were attracted by this inheritance incident, few people noticed that the Daily Prophet in the same period actually reported a vicious case also involving goblins. This is called diverting public opinion. Pure blood families, the Ministry of Magic, and many so-called big shots know this well. In a guest room on the 2nd floor of the Leaky Cauldron, while sipping Ozero sherry with half a tablespoon of icing sugar, Horace Slughorn was sitting on the sofa while explaining endlessly to Bourne. But in fact, these little tricks are indeed useful if they are useful, but they are useless if they are not. Because the power of wizards can only be obtained by relying on the wands and spells in our hands. Those who rely on public opinion to control the situation people are actually just covering up their own powerlessness. Of course, I'm not saying that the influence on public opinion and the control of connections are completely meaningless. However, little Bourne, you can slowly experience these things in the next 7 years at Hogwarts. The key is to focus on learning. In stark contrast to the tavern below, the leaky cauldron's upstairs rooms are surprisingly clean and comfortable, allowing wizards, witches, or wizards and witches to spend the night. A beautiful wooden staircase leads to the guest rooms upstairs, each with a brass number on the door. The number on the outside of the room booked by Horace and Bourne is 11. The 2 beds in this room look very comfortable, and several pieces of oak furniture are also shiny, indicating that they have been varnished and often used. Be wiped. As it was September, the fireplace in the room was not yet in use, but in winter it would have a crackling, cheerful fire. After taking Bourne to Diagon Alley to buy school supplies during the day, Horace decided to take his grandson to stay one night at the Leaky Cauldron and go directly to King's Cross Station the next day. Compared to young wizards from Muggle families or even some pure-blood families, Bourne's pressure to purchase school supplies is undoubtedly much less. Chapter 27. An old man and a young man, one kept talking and the other listened patiently. Tonight, Bourne did not ask all kinds of questions like he usually did when listening to Grandpa Horace's lectures. He just listened patiently. This is the most basic respect for an empty nester who will not see his relatives for several months. Listening and listening, the night passed, and the next morning the grandfather and grandson were woken up by the wake-up call service in the guest room of the Leaky Cauldron. Had a classic English breakfast, roasted tomatoes, soybeans with tomato sauce, sausages, scrambled eggs, toast, and a bowl of oatmeal with milk. Horace took Bourne out of the tavern, and the 2 of them carried their suitcases and walked to King's Cross Station adjacent to Diagon Alley. At the station entrance, while helping Bourne put the suitcase on the trolley, Horace stood still and did not take a step forward. "My child, I will send you here." The fat old man showed a kind smile. "The little warrior of the Slughorn family will have to go on the next journey alone. Grandpa believes that in the Slughorn family, in addition to gaining knowledge, schwoes, you can also win many honors and leave the best memory in your life." After saying that, the old man touched Bourne's head, then turned and left King's Cross Station. As he walked away, he raised his hand and bowed to Bourne without looking back. "Horace, come on. You must keep your handsome back and don't let little Bourne see you crying." McGonagall, Snape, Sprout, Flitwick, Dumbledore, Madame Pomfrey, Madame Hooch. "Well, yes, these people should have received the letter I sent, and they will take care of them. Such a nice little Bourne. Oh, bad, I forgot to send a letter to Filch. He won't make things difficult for little Bourne, right? If you are caught wandering at night, you will be punished by cleaning the bathroom. No, I have to make up a letter for him when I get back. If you give the old guy a qualification for the spell correspondence training course, he will take this." Although he didn't know what was going on in the heart of this suddenly cool Grandpa Horace, Bourne still waved to the old man's back and shouted, "Goodbye, Grandpa, I will write to you every week." Horace's body stagnated for a moment, and then he crossed the street outside the station at a faster speed than before and quickly disappeared. Bourne then turned around, pushed the trolley containing the suitcase, and walked into King's Cross Station. This railway station is relatively old, with a history of more than 100 years. The yellow brick walls are already mottled in large areas, and there is no clear distinction between the waiting hall and the platform. Because today is the first day of school at Hogwarts, as soon as Bourne entered the station, he saw many people whose clothes were incompatible with the ordinary people around him, but the muggles around him seemed to turn a blind eye to them. Needless to say, these people must be wizard parents sending their children to school. Of course, there are some exceptions. "Okay, you're here, kid. It's between platform 9 and platform 10. Your platform should be between this platform, right, but it looks like it hasn't been repaired yet, right?" The speaker was a fat man, whose figure was even more exaggerated than Bourne's grandfather Horace. Because of his big beer belly, if he didn't bend down, he would definitely not be able to see his feet if he lowered his head. The person this man was talking to was a skinny boy. The boy wore a pair of black-rimmed glasses and ill-fitting clothes that were obviously one size too big. The trolley in front of him was filled to the brim with 2 large suitcases, and there was a large cage on the upper suitcase. "A Snow White Owl is locked up." Harry Potter and his uncle Vernon. Bourne recognized the 2 people in front of him with just one glance. Unlike the time travelers in some fan fictions I had seen in my previous life, who said they wanted to get around Harry Potter, but were more honest than anyone else, Bourne walked over openly. "Hello, you are also a student going to Hogwarts, right?" Bourne greeted the savior. "Platform 9, not only does this platform have a funny name, but it's also really hard to find." Just like a drowning man suddenly grasping a life-saving straw, after hearing Bourne's words, Harry Potter nodded desperately. His uncle Vernon glanced at Bourne, then turned and walked towards the station door, seeming to be muttering words like freak in his mouth. Bourne ignored him and continued talking to Harry Potter. That platform cannot be seen by ordinary people. It is a secret among wizards. As he spoke, he winked at Vernon's retreating back. Then, Bourne pointed to the Platform 9 and Platform 10 plastic boards hanging on the wall. There was an entire red brick wall between the two boards. Besides, the term 9 is not accurate. If you really follow this number % to find the entrance, you will probably end up with a bang. At this point, Bourne couldn't help but feel speechless. This time I'm really speechless. Because wizards are generally not very good at mathematics. Harry Potter smiled awkwardly. Although he went to elementary school in a Muggle school, as a poor student, how many people can hear mathematics without feeling guilty? Okay, I'm not going to be too pretentious. The real entrance to Platform 9 is actually in the middle of Platforms 9 and 10. As he spoke, Bourne adjusted the direction of the front of his car and aimed it at that side wall. I'll give you a sample and you'll understand. Immediately afterwards, Bourne pushed the cart straight towards the wall. Seeing Bourne's body disappear, Harry Potter's eyes widened in surprise. Amazing magic. But before he could sigh, almost at the moment Bourne disappeared, he heard a muffled sound of bang, as well as exclamations and screams such as ouch and oh no. The magic failed, or there was an accident. Although he didn't know Bourne's name, Harry Potter could still tell the difference between good and bad, and he could feel the kindness that Bourne had just expressed. Therefore, when he saw that his new friend encountered some accidents, he couldn't help but become anxious. But as a newbie in the magic world, he didn't know what to do now. Should he rush in and take a look, or should he find someone else for help? And the question was, who should he go to for help now? How to do? Waiting online, very anxious. Harry Potter anxiously grasped the handle of the car, feeling at a loss where he was, and beads of sweat appeared on his head. Bourne is actually fine. It's other people who are in trouble. The accident just now was actually a small traffic accident. It turned out that he pushed the cart into Platform 9 and directly attacked a family of 3 who were taking a group photo at the entrance of the passage. The trolley carrying luggage with a total weight of more than 200 kilograms, don't ask, the wizard's robe was inside, hit a middle-aged father hard on his waist, knocking him directly. Everyone fell to the ground. This time, it not only hit the middle-aged father badly, but also frightened the middle-aged girl who was holding a camera to take a photo of her daughter and her husband, as well as the middle-aged girl who was standing in line with her father with her head raised, taking photos. The real girl. Are you okay? Chapter 28. Kucha, Kucha, Kucha. The Hogwarts Express departed from King's Cross Station and soon left London, heading north. The houses on both sides of the railway are gradually replaced by rich green. The train speeds along the fields, and some cattle and sheep are walking in the pasture area to feed. Because of the little farce on the platform and the interference of the variable Bourne, the protagonist group got together a little early. Including the Weasley twins and Bourne himself, there were 6 people, so they simply occupied a cubicle. Bourne quickly put the suitcase on the luggage rack. Seeing how easily he lifted the seemingly heavy suitcase with each hand, the twins immediately bet that Bourne must have been taking various supplements since he was a child. Bourne, I guess you must have eaten good food since you were a child. After sitting down, Fred patted Bourne's arm and winked at his brother George. Upon receiving the signal, George immediately took out a piece of candy wrapped in wax paper from his pocket. Try this toffee. We added the blood of ream cow in it. It is the main ingredient in many tonic potions. Hey, I'm your brother. Ron, who was sitting opposite, pouted dissatisfiedly. I've never tried the candies you made. Fred laughed and said, oh, dear little Ronnie. This nougat is a new invention that George and I just made yesterday. It is our flagship product at Hogwarts this year. Then, he added, if you also want to try something new, just come to us and buy it directly in a few days. George also added, moreover, you can also enjoy the freshman discount, 5 silver coins for 1, you are a child. Thank you so much, Ron rolled his eyes angrily, you can obviously rob me, but you still give me something in exchange. The Weasley twins didn't seem to care about their little brother's sarcasm. They just looked at Bourne with burning eyes. If eyes could speak, then the twins must be trying their best to encourage him, eat, eat, eat. Under the eager eyes of the two, Bourne moved the toffee to his mouth little by little, but when the candy was about to touch his lips, he quickly placed it on the small table in the middle of the cubicle. I decided not to eat. He looked at the twins with a smile and raised his eyebrows at them proudly. Just kidding, if such an obvious prank could not be seen anymore, Bourne would really embarrass many transmigrators. Merlin's strawberry underpants. George and Fred sighed at the same time, falling against the back of the seat in unison. It was a bad start. George tilted his head and looked at his brother. Fred nodded in response. I feel that our prank skills must be upgraded this year. The freshmen are all monsters. Their little brother Ron understood immediately and immediately denounced, What? You two actually dare to play pranks on the freshmen? I'm going to write a letter and tell my mother. However, his tone was not filled with indignation, but rather as if he had discovered something brilliant, and was a little excited. Faced with the threat from their little brother, the Weasley twins just looked at each other and immediately burst into laughter. George, listen, I'm going to tell Mommy. Fred, we have another boy in our family. Ha 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 ha. The two brothers clapped their hands in the air, as if they were really celebrating. Bourne looked at these two pure fun-loving people with a little envy. After playing around for a while, the two Weasley brothers were ready to leave the compartment together and go shopping in other carriages. They are third-year students at Hogwarts and have many friends in school. Although they didn't meet many when they got on the bus before, as social butterflies, they always had to say hello to their friends during the long ride. Before leaving, they invited others to join them. That guy Lee Jordan wrote to us during the summer vacation and said that he got a bag spider as a pet. Which one of you wants to see it? Bourne was interested in looking at bag spiders, so he gladly accepted the invitation. But Ron immediately shook his head into a rattle. He has been scared to death of spiders since he was a child. Since Hermione had gone to the bathroom at this time, Harry didn't think it would be good to leave Ron alone in the cubicle, so he decided to stay with his newfound friend. In fact, Harry really wanted to go. What child wouldn't have the instinct to join in the fun, and besides, it was a bag spider. When he lived at Uncle Vernon's house, he had never seen it before, not even heard of it. Heard about it? Is that kind of spider like a kangaroo? It also has a bag on its belly with many small spiders in it. Just as Harry was wondering what a spider looked like, Bourne had already followed the Weasley twins out. However, the piece of toffee that they had planned to use to trick Bourne seemed to have been accidentally left on the small table in the cubicle by the twins instead of being taken away together. Bourne followed the two brothers through several carriages, and saw a group of little wizards crowded on the aisle outside the compartment, playing non-stop. They surrounded a little black boy with dreadlocks in the middle, and they kept making noisy excitement. Lee! Don't be so stingy, show me your big baby quickly. I have to make sure you are not bragging when you write letters during the summer vacation. That's right. Lee. And unless you let me touch it, I don't believe that big baby of yours is alive. Lee. Didn't you say that your big baby is super capable of squirting? Show it quickly, don't just squeeze out a little paste. Lee Jordan smiled triumphantly, enjoying the feeling of being in the middle of the stage. At this moment, he is the most handsome kid on this walkway, no one else. No problem. No problem. Still no problem. Lee Jordan answered the little wizards who made requests to him one by one. It's okay to touch it, but you can't weigh it. Its stomach has been a little bloated in the past 2 days. When I get to school, I have to ask the professor for help to see if it is sick or needs to be dumped. As he spoke, Lee Jordan lifted up his wizard robe and showed off his big treasure. A tin box containing butter biscuits. Then, under the curious gazes of all the little wizards, Lee Jordan slowly opened the lid of the tin box with his fingers. Soon, a spider leg with smooth black hair stretched out from the box and gently rubbed against the iron sheet outside the biscuit box. After confirming that there was no danger, more spider legs stretched out one after another. 1, 2, 3, the bag spider also poked its head and body out of the box. It has black fluff on its body, and its small eyes are arranged in 2 rows on the top of its head. 2 dark lines like white ribbons draw a circle on its back and are connected to its swollen abdomen. There are 2 fangs on the side of its mouth, which will touch it from time to time and make a clicking sound. How about it? Does my big baby look good? Lee Jordan showed off to the little wizards around him. However, some little wizard suddenly said the truth. Lee Jordan, your big baby doesn't look very big at all. The scene was very embarrassing. Fortunately, the Weasley brothers have arrived at the scene, and the two social level support kings will naturally not let their friends lose face. Chapter 29. They don't know how to help Goyle remove the spider. In other words, should I help him? After all, these three guys are really annoying. Here's the thing. As soon as he heard that the famous Harry Potter was on the train, Draco, Goyle, and Crabbe went from compartment to compartment to look for him. Moreover, they don't know how to knock on the door. For this reason, these three people made countless young lovers scold each other. If he hadn't been lucky enough not to enter the carriage where Gryffindor gathered in the first place, plus the Malfoy family's iconic hair, these three people would probably have been in a carriage. Can't get out. When they found the compartment where Harry and Ron were staying, Hermione was also there with Neville, who she met, who was looking for a pet toad. Several young wizards were sharing the little rich Harry had just bought. Lots of little snacks. When Draco came up, he performed a king's spirit leaking out, and then he vividly performed what it means to make a cup and get slapped in the face. To be honest, it would be a pity for him to go to Hogwarts to learn magic with this talent. Wouldn't the future be brighter if you become a comedian, dense fog? Then, after being humiliated by Harry Potter, Draco started talking trash like the scum of the pure blood family, Mudblood, and silly big one. Crabbe and Goyle were half pretending to help, and half were really greedy, so they randomly grabbed the pile of snacks that Harry Potter bought with money and stuffed them into their mouths without looking at them. The toffee that had been accidentally dropped by the kings of prank Weasley twins had entered Goyle's mouth. As a result, Gore fell short. His tongue suddenly extended out of the youngest's head, looking like a banshee that often appears in horror stories. And this is not over yet. Just like a teapot with several teacups, the second cup immediately found Gore. After being slapped by George and Fred, the bag spider finally escaped from the clutches of the two brothers and happened to crawl into this car. Even though spiders are creatures with multiple pairs of eyes, they actually have very poor eyesight. Coupled with the fact that a lot of spider silk had just been sprayed out and a lot of protein had been lost, the little guy was even more hungry and dizzy. Therefore, it mistook Gower for a giant worm that Lee Jordan often fed to it. High in protein, soft and delicious, delicious. With lightning speed, the bag spider pounced on Gower, opened its fangs and bit his tongue in one fell swoop. Then, the Bourne and Weasley twins came to the carriage and saw the horrifying scene of a kiss between a human and a spider. Merlin's ripped socks. George sighed with his mouth wide open, but he immediately shut his mouth tightly. It hurts just to look at it. Fred seemed to have said something sarcastic, but he still told the truth. The most conscientious one was Bourne. Looking at the two brothers, he, a little wizard who had not yet officially entered school, couldn't help but ask, "Haven't you already studied magic at Hogwarts for 2 years? Use a magic spell to put this bag. Will spider help Gore take it down?" In fact, after helping the two brothers and Lee Jordan untie the cobwebs with the group of Gryffindors, it didn't take long for Bourne to think of a question. By the way, aren't these students all wizards, and they are all middle and high school students? Why solve problems with your hands instead of a wand? Hands better than wands? If this is the case, then why did wizards invent wands? Is it an IQ tax created by wand-making masters from ancient times to the present? It can't be. After listening to Bourne's words, the twins looked at each other, their eyes seeming to say, "It's broken. He tricked it. How about you try it first? It's you first. You first." Fortunately, the silent communication between the two did not fall into an endless loop, because the twins noticed that Bourne was looking at them with inquiring eyes. Ahem, George clenched his fists, cleared his throat, and began to make nonsense seriously. "Oh, no, it was an explanation. That's it," he said, "there will definitely be no problem for both of us with the magic spell. The key question is what kind of magic spell to use. Stick in the front teeth, hula la la grin, upside down golden bell, leg locking spell, a lajo hole opening, left and right separation. The short list is a little long and it takes a little time to think about it." Fred nodded in agreement. Bourne was confused when he heard this. "I am not well read, but you can't fool me. These spells are probably, maybe, either small evil spells, or general spells used by wizards to open secret doors. Some of the best spells the Weasley twins learned during their 2 years at Hogwarts were either to pull off pranks or simply to facilitate their night outs." Bourne, who had previewed standard spells in advance, has now thought of 3 spells to solve the current situation: Levitation Curse, Freezing Curse and Cutting Curse, and these 3 spells are from Hogwarts 1 and 2. The focus of the grade magic exam. As if he felt that the little wizard in front of him was not easy to fool, Fred, the twin, added, "There is another problem, that is, the little fat guy jumps too fast now. Our spell may not be able to hit him. If he being able to stay in place, hey, it seems like there is a spell." The twins looked at each other again, with confident expressions on their faces, and then raised their wands at the same time. Everything is petrified. Even without verbal communication, the two brothers, who had a good understanding of each other, used their wands to fire two translucent rays at the same time, and flew towards Gore, who was in close contact with the bag spider. This spell is a spell learned in the first-year spell class. According to the classification of spells, it should be classified as a curse, but the damage caused to the target of the spell, human or animal, is not great. It can put the target into a state similar to petrification, but even without using a counter spell, the curse can be automatically broken within an hour or two at most. Originally, logically speaking, the Weasley twins should have petrified the bag spider. It's just that the two of them took into account the problem of their own inaccurate shooting, and because they didn't want to embarrass themselves in front of their junior students, they changed their targets to Gower, who had a better aim. Anyway, as long as Goyle was petrified, the two of them could pick the bag spider off his tongue with their hands. The idea was good, but the actual result was a little unexpected. When they released the spell, the Hogwarts Express happened to make a small turn along the track, under the influence of inertia, whilst the twins' arms holding their wands tilted to the side. Naturally, the magic spell shot was also deflected a little bit. They were hiding aside Draco and Crabbe respectively. None of the two unlucky children were left behind. They were frozen on the spot as they hugged each other with frightened expressions on their faces. He looked at Bourne, then at the other little wizards standing at the door of the compartment, and finally at Goyle, who was shouting even more cheerfully. George grinned awkwardly. "Perhaps you don't believe." Fred shrugged. "We didn't mean it." The twins made a little fool of themselves, and Bourne simply raised his own wand. Chapter 30. The joys and sorrows of people are not connected. The Weasley twins agreed that with Bourne, Gryffindor has secured the Quidditch Cup this year. Even if he hasn't put on that hat and attended the sorting party, it's still unknown whether he will be sorted into Gryffindor. Even before completing the entrance ceremony set by the Big Four, Bourne is still not officially a Hogwarts student in theory. But are those important? The twins didn't think so. In their eyes, he first petrified little Malfoy's follower with a mutated petrification spell, and then punched and kicked a senior Slytherin Quidditch captain, 2 ironclad facts, enough to prove that Bourne he is an excellent little lion. Old Green Landfinder has more things to do. However, unlike these two people who are purely having fun, Bourne is not so optimistic now. He has never taken a boat to Hogwarts Castle, never heard the whispers of the sorting hat, and never attended the sorting party, which is said to have the best British food. He does not want to board the Hogwarts Castle as they quickest expel Jo's school history. Fortunately, the further you go towards the front of the car, the less powerful the uncontrollable all fall to the ground, serial lightning, becomes. Bourne discovered that although there were still people in these carriages who were affected by the attack, there were only a few sporadic victims, and these unlucky little wizards were only electrocuted and not really affected by the petrification curse. This is a good thing. But at the moment when his thoughts were suspended, there was a sudden muffled bang from the locomotive of the Hogwarts Express. Immediately afterwards, accompanied by a harsh sound of friction between steel wheels and rails, the train, which had been travelling at a normal speed towards Scotland, braked and stopped in a middle-of-nowhere field. Because of the sudden braking, some unpacked suitcases fell from the luggage rack, hitting a few unlucky little wizards. Some little wizards' pet cages also fell to the ground, and owls and other pets were broken. Got out of the cage and flew around along the aisle of the carriage, causing a lot of trouble. A few shirtless dwarfs ran out from the front of the car. They wore aprons in front of their bodies and were covered with black soot. These dwarves were members of the locomotive driving crew of this train. Just as they were adding coal to the machine, a thin bolt of lightning penetrated the locomotive, detonating the rising coal dust and blowing a hole in the water tank of the train engine. The dwarfs were yelling and cursing, and they kept asking which little wizard was unruly, and threatened to be dealt with severely. At this time, there was only one sentence left in Bourne's mind: what to do, wait online, it's quite urgent. Today is destined to be a day that will be recorded in a history of Hogwarts. The Hogwarts Express, which has been running safely for more than 100 years and has never been delayed since its first operation, was delayed for the first time in its history. A full 2 hours late. It was close to 8 o'clock when the train slowly pulled into the Hogsmeade platform. The little wizards were all very hungry, and all the snacks in the car were sold out. So much so, that when the angry dwarf pilots took her out of the car, the witch pushing a cart selling snacks vowed to Bourne that he would get a special discount next time he bought something in the car. Bourne had nothing to say but thank you. However, what was different from what was expected was that neither Dumbledore, whom he had met, nor McGonagall, the two principals and deputy principals of Hogwarts who were qualified to manage academic affairs, appeared because of today's chaos. Hogsmeade Station. Even professors such as Snape, Sprout, and Flitwick did not show up. As in the original novel, the only person who came to greet the little wizards was Hagrid, the gamekeeper and keykeeper of Hogwarts. This strong man, who obviously had giant blood, stopped the dwarf pilots who were about to take Bourne to find Dumbledore's theory, and then took out 2 bottles of aged fire whiskey from his coat pocket. Although they are about the same height as goblins, magical creatures like dwarves are actually 2 different humanoids from the former. Dwarves' faces are more like humans, boxy, without obvious pointed ears and hooked noses. They are generally quite strong, and some even appear to be as wide as the length and width. Also, dwarves and goblins are different. Although they also like gold, they are very accepting of death and are basically impossible to be bribed by others. Unless you can do what you like. Old Elton, this is the gift Dumbledore asked me to give you. As he spoke, Hagrid handed the fire whiskey in his hand to the leaders of the dwarf pilots. Then, he continued, Dumbledore asked me to thank you for your years of diligent service to Hogwarts on his behalf. Someone from the Hogwarts Management Committee will also contact you regarding the subsequent train maintenance costs. However, you can't bring the little wizard into the castle today. Because it is related to whether a very important traditional ceremony can be carried out smoothly, Hogwarts has passed it down for more than 1,000 years. After Hagrid's explanation, and of course, the aged fire whiskey also played its due role, the dwarf pilots finally gave up their plan to take Bourne to Hogwarts Castle to complain. After seeing these difficult dwarves leave, the big Hagrid took out a handkerchief from his coat pocket and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He looked at Bourne, a smile on his bearded face. You are little Bourne, don't worry, the great Principal Dumbledore will not expel any students casually. However, he immediately changed the subject. Of course, any little wizard who makes a mistake will also be notarized and punished, no one will be an exception. Bourne nodded quickly, expressing his agreement with Hagrid's words, and said at the same time, with Grandpa Dumbledore, I feel relieved. Ha ha ha, Hagrid laughed heartily. Fans are always the happiest people when their idol is recognized. You're right to think so. But remember, when you go to Hogwarts, you have to call Dumbledore headmaster. But you can't imitate some bad boys and form gangs at a young age. Be special. After saying that, he winked at Bourne, and then turned towards the other little wizards who had also just gotten off the train. Pick up, Hagrid is professional. He first arranged for the little wizards in 2nd grade and above to sit in groups of 6 on a group of carriages that had been waiting next to the station. Bourne saw the Thestrals pulling the carriages. They had heads like fire dragons and long hair on their backs. He has a pair of big bat-like wings, his body is dark and skinny. Most little wizards can't see them, so they think the carriage is driven by magic. After these little wizards left in the car, Hagrid immediately called all the first-year students to gather together and follow him on foot out of the station and along the path to a huge lake. He asked the little wizards to board some boats moored on the shore in groups of 4, while he went alone in a boat. As he shouted "Let's go!" like thousands of boats competing against each other, small boats sailed across the dark lake at a speed that seemed slow but actually fast, and then passed through a deep culvert at the bottom of the cliff and came to the underground docks of Hogwarts Castle. Chapter 31. Unlike previous years, the first-grade wizards did not attend the sorting ceremony immediately after entering the banquet hall. Dumbledore, who was sitting in the middle of the classroom, stood up. The old man in purple wizard robes walked to the center of the high platform, which was the position he would stand in previous years when he gave a speech after the banquet. A podium inlaid with a golden owl relief appeared in front of Dumbledore out of thin air, silently but quite eye-catching. "Welcome," he said, "welcome everyone to Hogwarts to start the new school year. However, before we hold the sorting ceremony today, there is still a little thing to deal with." Dumbledore looked at the first years, at Harry Potter, and finally his eyes fell on Bourne. "You little ones must have heard about what happened on the Hogwarts Express. After all, there are no secrets in Hogwarts." His words caused a burst of laughter from the students on the 4 long tables, but they soon became quiet. Although I heard the news a little later than you, through various understandings, I, an old man, finally figured out the cause and effect of the whole thing. In fact, it was two accidents. First of all, let us pray for Mr. Gower, who was unfortunately injured in the first accident. Because he has been sent to Madame Pomfrey, he will be under observation in the medical room tonight, and he is destined to not be able to enjoy the sumptuous dinner that follows. We have also dealt with the bag spider that caused his injury and its owner. I won't go into details here. However, if the first accident was excusable, the second accident was inseparable from the recklessness and carelessness of some people. George Weasley. Fred Weasley. Bourne Slughorn. Dumbledore called 3 names in succession, and the Weasley twins immediately stood up at the Gryffindor table, but their faces did not show even the slightest bit of embarrassment. On the contrary, Percy Weasley, the elder brother of the twins and the prefect of Gryffindor, who was sitting next to him, didn't know whether it was because of shame or simply a pain in his head, so he covered his forehead with his hands. Seeing this situation, he secretly said that what is supposed to come will always come, so Bourne also stepped out of the team of first-year wizards. The Weasley brothers recklessly used the petrifying curse on the train. Although they had good intentions according to the investigation, they accidentally injured the first-year students. Therefore, I decided to deduct 5 points from each of them. As soon as he finished speaking, among the metal hourglasses that were placed side by side in the corner of the hall and symbolized the 4 major colleges, the one belonging to Gryffindor had 10 rubies stuck in the upper part that had not yet fallen. There is a big difference compared to the hourglass. At the same time, Bourne noticed that Professor McGonagall, who was standing next to the first-year team, had his arms crossed behind his back, and the hand that was not holding the wand seemed to be clenched into a fist. As for Mr. Bourne Slughorn, he cast the curse indiscriminately without systematic study, which caused the curse to mutate, and a total of 10 classmates were harmed by the mutated curse. Similar to the punishment just meted out to the Weasley brothers, Mr. Slughorn will be deducted 50 house points. In addition, his mutation spell caused damage to the train, damaged public property at Hogwarts, and caused the century-old train to be delayed for the first time. For this, he will be deducted 200 college points. Unlike the situation after announcing the punishment for the Weasley twins, as soon as Dumbledore announced the punishment for Bourne, the students at the 4 long tables below exploded. In a sense, the Weasley twins are famous figures in the 4 major colleges. Everyone is used to deducting points from them and is not surprised by it. However, Bourne is still a freshman who has just entered school. The one-time deduction of 250 points is probably unprecedented in the history of Hogwarts. It is hard to say whether the scoring hourglasses contained that many gems at the beginning of the school year. Moreover, some smart people immediately realized an extremely terrifying thing: the little wizard named Bourne Slughorn had not yet participated in the sorting ceremony. Unlike the Weasleys, the current Bourne Slughorn actually it could be a student from any college. What is a poison pill? This is his. When the little wizards thought of this, they almost all gasped in unison. Anyone who still has some thoughts about their college winning the college cup will look at Bourne with extremely frightened eyes. Don't come over. The deans of the 4 colleges also had different expressions on their faces. Thanks to the letter sent to them by Horace and the unusual family name Slughorn, the 4 deans all knew whose child Bourne was. Therefore, the old 3 McGonagall, Sprout and Flitwick were not actually nervous, while the face of young Snape, who had greasy black hair and wore black wizard robes, completely changed. The bottom of the pot is ashes. Since the parties concerned have no doubts about the punishment, Dumbledore said, the sorting ceremony will continue. As soon as the principal said these words, the pointed wizard hat placed on the 4-legged stool came to life. It began to twist and turn, and a wide gap opened in the edge of the hat, like a mouth. Then it sang a ditty: maybe I'm not pretty enough, but never judge a book by its appearance. If you can find a more beautiful hat than me, I can eat myself. There was also a song behind the sorting hat, but most of the freshmen didn't listen to it because the song before it was so scary. It could even eat itself if it was so cruel. Is that what Bourne said is true? It can really do it. Pry open the heads of these little wizards one by one? It is precisely because of this that when the sorting hat finished singing, all the first-year students were silent and no one applauded it at all. The sorting hat immediately broke through the defense. You know, the lyrics of this song were compiled after a full year of thinking. Even if it doesn't sound good, it's okay to support it, right? You are the worst class I have ever led. Just when the sorting hat was about to be exported to Zon, Professor McGonagall quickly took it out of the stool. And, interestingly, it is somewhat similar to petting a cat. The Sorting Hat immediately shuts up when it is grabbed by the scruff of the neck. She took a few steps forward, holding a roll of parchment in her other hand. Whoever's name I call now will wear this hat and wait for the results of the sorting. Hannah Abbott. A little girl with a red face and 2 braids stumbled out of the queue, with tears still in her eyes. She put on her hat, the brim of which fell just over her eyes. Not long after sitting down, the Sorting Hat immediately shouted out, "Hufflepuff!" At the same time, the Sorting Hat was cursing and thinking, "I caught you. It turns out this little guy is causing trouble." The sorting ceremony proceeds very quickly. Generally, as soon as the little wizard puts on the hat, the Sorting Hat will immediately give its judgment. Only when Harry Potter was sorted, the Sorting Hat took a little longer to make its judgment. It seemed to have been chatting quietly with Harry Potter for a while, and Harry Potter finally shouted, "I absolutely not going to Slytherin." Chapter 32. When the ceremony ended with Blaise Zabinai being sorted into Slytherin, Dumbledore immediately stood up and announced the start of the dinner with one sentence. "Idiot. Cry. Residue. Screw it." After he sat down, some senior students from the 4 colleges began to take the lead in applauding, and soon the banquet hall burst into warm applause. The dinner was very sumptuous, and the long tables of each house seemed to be transformed into many foods in an instant: roast beef, roast chicken, fried pork chops, lamb chops, sausages, roast quail, black pudding, Yorkshire pudding, boiled potatoes, baked potatoes, fried potatoes, potatoes stewed with tomatoes, and, for some odd reason, some sweets appeared on the table. Bourne ate very happily, and when he was eating the 3rd piece of lamb ribs, a porcelain plate with an S letter pattern suddenly appeared in his hand, and the house elves of Hogwarts prepared something for him. Served with meatballs tartar as a personal snack. Due to the delay of the train and the delay in the sorting ceremony, the little wizards of all grades were so hungry that their chests were pressed against their backs. As a result, this year's dinner was much quieter than previous ones, because most of the little wizards were busy showing off. After the little wizards had eaten and drank, as usual, Dumbledore emphasized the discipline of Hogwarts again. For example, don't cast spells in the corridor, little wizards can't enter the Forbidden Forest, and a new one added this year, don't go near the corridor on the right side of the 4th floor. While speaking, Dumbledore also glanced at the long Gryffindor table. George and Fred elbowed each other, and Bourne noticed that the twins seemed to have proud expressions on their faces. At the last part of the dinner, everyone sang the Hogwarts school song in the banquet hall. Everyone could choose their favorite tune. The Weasley twins deliberately chose the slow-paced funeral march. When everyone else finished singing, Dumbledore personally conducted a few bars for them and gave them a round of applause. "Music," the old wizard said, wiping his eyes, "is more charming than anything we do here. It's bedtime now, let's go back to the dormitory." Under the leadership of the prefects of each college, the young wizards of each grade returned to the common room of their respective colleges. The Gryffindor boys' dormitory was at the top of a spiral staircase, apparently in a tower, a room for 5, with 5 ornate 4-poster beds with curtains. Each bed is equipped with a cabinet for storing luggage and clothes, and a small single writing desk equipped only with a round stool, not an armchair. When he entered the dormitory assigned to him, Bourne found that his luggage had been delivered. He was roommates with Harry Potter, Ron, Neville, and a young wizard named Seamus Finnegan. Because Bourne had promised to write a letter to the empty nester Horace every week, he did not go to bed directly. Instead, he sat next to the writing table and wrote a line of small words on a piece of parchment letterhead with a quill pen. "Nothing to do today, just listen to music in the banquet hall." Although he used magic spells to petrify 10 of his classmates today and bombed the Hogwarts Express, these 2 incidents have already deducted all college points, so rounding them off is equivalent to nothing. And he felt that Grandpa Horace, who loved him very much, would not lose his temper because of these 2 little things. In fact, Horace really won't, because he is now more concerned about another relatively serious problem. "How come my little Bourne was sorted into Gryffindor? Albus, what are you doing?" Just as Bourne was getting ready to go to bed, Horace was having a confrontation with Dumbledore, the principal of Hogwarts, as a parent of a student. If an average wizard wants to communicate instantly, he either has to sacrifice his dignity by sticking his butt up and sticking his head into the fireplace, or he has to be extremely wealthy and can afford an expensive 2-way mirror. Powerful wizards like Horace and Dumbledore have more civilized and convenient methods. For example, use a high-end physical guardian angel. At this time, in the principal's office of Hogwarts, a silver-white T-Biba warthog was uttering human words. I am the last head of Slytherin. My family is one of the 20,8 pure-blood families. I have already found someone to customize my little Bournes when he ran for Slytherin Quidditch captain, prefect, and student council president. Support merchandise. Now tell me, he was sorted into Gryffindor House. The warthog patron saint of T-Biba was questioning Dumbledore while circling around the principal's office angrily. The portraits of the former principals hanging on the wall should usually have gone to bed at this time, but now they all appear in the portraits. This little guy Horace seems really angry. A principal from the Black family said in the spirit of watching the excitement and not taking it too seriously, actually, it's no wonder, my name is Sirius. When my descendant was sorted into Gryffindor, I told him that he would not end well. Guess what? He ended up in Azkaban within a few years, tisk tisk tisk. Before Principal Black could finish speaking, a principal wearing knight armor and obviously Gryffindor style jumped into his frame. Phineas, stop chattering here, he lifted the visor of his beak helmet, revealing his face with a thick beard. Doesn't Sirius have a younger brother who went to Slytherin House? He followed the mysterious man and ended up dying miserably. Compared to his ending, Azkaban was just a sanatorium. If you don't accept it, come to a duel. The bearded wizard raised his meteor hammer in one hand and his wand in the other, as if he was about to start a fight if he disagreed. Humph, you fool! Phineas Black glanced at the other party disdainfully and blew his stylishly groomed goatee. Try saying it again. Just try it. Enough. The current headmaster, Dumbledore, and his predecessor, Armando Dippet, who now lives in the portrait, spoke at the same time. Dumbledore glanced at his old leader, and the two men immediately understood. As two Hogwarts talkers who had experienced Voldemort's time at school, neither of them wanted others to mention that dangerous student too much, at least not for now. Albus, tell me honestly, are you hiding something from me? Horace's patron saint used a four-legged stool as a stepping stone, the one with the sorting hat on it, and the T-Biba warthog also squeezed the sorting hat to the ground, and jumped twice in a row to Dumbledore. On the large desk in front of Leto. He stared directly at the current headmaster of Hogwarts with his two egg-sized eyeballs. Why do you want me to help brew the liquefied patroness charm? Tell me the truth. This year Lily's son Harry Potter also came to Hogwarts and entered Gryffindor House, and my little Bourne was assigned to Gryffindor. Is this a careful arrangement on your part? Is it, related to that person? Faced with doubts, Dumbledore put his two hands covered with rings on the armrests, and pressed his tall figure of more than 6 feet against the back of the high-backed seat, and the expression on his face became extremely serious. Horace, my old friend. Ever since the headmaster Hufflepuff, the sorting ceremony in Hogwarts has been presided over by the sorting hat. Even the headmaster cannot influence or change its decision. Chapter 33. It's over there, look. Which way? Next to the tall red-haired boy. The one with glasses. Did you see his face? Did you see that scar on him? The next day, these whispers followed Harry as he walked out of his dormitory. Students lined up outside the classroom, all standing on tiptoe, wanting to see his true face. They passed him in the corridor and came back, staring at him. To be honest, the feeling of being in the spotlight was a little refreshing at first, but soon his feeling began to take a turn for the worse. Harry very much hoped that his classmates wouldn't do this, as he had to concentrate on finding his way to the classroom. I clearly remember that we just saw this armor, and we just saw the person in this portrait, Harry whispered to Ron because he was worried that others would hear him and be embarrassed. The first class they entered today was their head of house's Transfiguration class, and no new Gryffindor student wanted to be late for this class. Ron, who had already walked up and down several stairs with Harry, became a little out of breath at this time. He said, George told me that there are 142 stairs in Hogwarts. Some are wide and big, some are narrow, small, and rickety, some lead to different places every Friday, some halfway up, a step will suddenly disappear, and you have to remember where to jump. In addition, there are many doors here that will not open for you if you ask them to open them rudely or poke them in the right place. Some doors are not real doors at all, but are just blocks of doors that appear to be doors' solid wall. Those armors can also move around on their own. The characters in the painting like to hang around when they wake up during the day, and sometimes even run outside the school. So you can't use them as a reference. Harry was a little envious of Ron, indeed, he came from a serious wizarding family and knew a lot. Then, did George and Fred tell you how to find the right way? They must have a trick, right? Ron scratched his head in embarrassment. They say that little wizards are late on the first day of school. In fact, it's almost a Hogwarts tradition. Harry. He was excited for nothing. However, he quickly thought of another question. Seamus hadn't gotten up yet and didn't know yet. Skip it. Before Neville left, he said he would ask senior classmates to help lead the way. Skip it. He and the stubborn Ron were preparing till we went to the Transfiguration classroom together, basically failing and skipping it. There were 5 people in the dormitory, and the remaining one was Bourne, who was the first to go out for morning exercises. Can he find the way smoothly? You know, Bourne promised them that he would bring a breakfast for everyone in the dormitory. I hope so, Harry prayed silently. At yesterday's dinner, he secretly looked at the professors sitting at the teacher's table out of curiosity. As a result, he was irritated by the Slytherin headmaster with impressive greasy hair, which caused the scar on his head to tremble. Painful pain. Therefore, at the end of the dinner, he did not eat the pumpkin pie as a staple food or dessert. He regrets it now. Unlike the Harrow duo who were battling with the ever-deforming stairs, Bourne quickly solved this difficult problem for the new little wizard. Although he was treated equally on the Hogwarts stairs and no special treatment was given because of his cuteness, Bourne quickly found the right way down from Gryffindor Tower. This was helped by the help of an acquaintance, or more accurately, a person in the painting. When he walked to the same picture frame with colorful curtains for the second time, when he had actually considered whether to climb over the railing of the stairs, he might as well have climbed to the first floor hall by climbing up a pillar that, according to his observation, would not deform. Someone suddenly said hello to him in the picture frame. "Mr. Sherlock, why are you at Hogwarts too?" Bourne asked. "Isn't Dr. Watson with you? Inside that oil painting is a small house." Bourne automatically ignored it the first time he passed by, but now he passed by for the second time. Sherlock, who was wearing pajamas and holding a toothbrush in his mouth, happened to come out of the house. After spitting out the foam in his mouth, Sherlock happily said to Bourne, "Watson. He has also come to Hogwarts. He should be staying with other ghosts in the castle now. Ever since the incident at the Hermitage, Dumbledore gave us a suggestion, to live in Hogwarts Castle during the week, and then go back during the summer vacation to run a summer camp for young wizards before they enter school. This is safer. The only problem is that I can't use fire crabs to walk around Hogwarts Castle. I want to go to other places and walk through the portraits one by one. Fortunately, there are enough magic portraits here, otherwise I would be bored to death if I could only look at the scenery in one place." After chatting with this interesting Mr. Sherlock for a while, Bourne asked naturally, "You are also a former Hogwarts graduate, right? You have been in these magic portraits for more than a year, so you must be very familiar with them. This castle, right? Today is my first day of school, can you show me the way down?" "Of course, no problem." Being able to communicate with others is something that Sherlock cannot refuse in the state of the person in the painting. Compared to death, he is actually more afraid and bored. So, under the guidance of this acquaintance, the little wizard Bourne quickly passed the ever-changing stairs and arrived at the Hall of Hogwarts. He first ran around the castle, then went to swim in the Black Lake next to the castle for a while, and then returned to Hogwarts Castle. On the way back, Bourne also met a professor, Professor Quirrel, who was wearing a purple turban on his head. He was walking through a muddy puddle, and the direction he came from was exactly what Dumbledore had ordered. A forbidden forest that students are not allowed to enter. Saying hello to the professor who claimed to have gone to the Forbidden Forest to find teaching materials for the students, Bourne clearly didn't ask, but he told him first. The two of them entered the gate of Hogwarts Castle. We parted ways happily. Strange. After they separated, Bourne suddenly realized a problem. He clearly had the memory of Quirrel being possessed by Voldemort, but even though he saw this person at the sorting dinner yesterday, he seemed to have naturally ignored the professor. This also made him couldn't help but guess, if he hadn't happened to meet each other today and chatted for a while at close range, would it be possible that he would be like other young wizards outside the protagonist group waiting until Dumbledore's point control method allowed Gran to only after Fendo won the Academy Cup? Did he think of this? Lowering your sense of presence as much as possible is definitely not caused by relying on the sneaky pace of an assassin. This is probably also a kind of magic. Bourne made a judgment in his mind. And just when he started to think about how he should get along with this 20-5-year-old professor? Should I report this guy directly? Or, how should he report Quirrel, Voldemort, to Dumbledore? Bourne's thoughts inevitably turned to another thing, because Quirrell or Voldemort had no ill intentions against him for the time being, so the Astartes' unique combat intuition did not give Bourne any advance warning. With him as a variable this year, can Gryffindor still get the Academy Cup? 250 points were deducted at the start. This kind of start was somewhat of a challenge to Dumbledore's point control skills, right? A bit difficult. After thinking about it, Bourne returned to the hall where the ceremony and dinner were held yesterday. This is also the dining hall of Hogwarts. Food is provided to all the little wizards 3 times a day in the morning, noon, and evening. Because he had promised other people in the dormitory to bring breakfast for them, Bourne found a plate with a dozen pies, a few roasted chicken legs, boiled eggs, and a large jug of milk. Then, he ate his breakfast. Unlike the dinner, the daily breakfast, lunch, and dinner provided by Hogwarts are not divided into 4 long tables according to the houses, but are filled with 1 long table. The little wizard who rushed to the restaurant chose the food he liked. Either a few people gathered together to find another table to sit at, or they simply sat next to this long table. While Bourne was eating, some senior students with textbooks came over and left after taking a few bites. Most of them are 5th and 7th grade students. After breakfast, they either go straight to the library or rush to the classroom for class, and then go to the library for self-study. Under the spur of owls, ordinary wizarding level tests, and newts, ultimate wizarding tests, their days are like spinning tops, and they must race against time to do anything. Students in other grades were much more leisurely and were not in such a hurry to have breakfast. Some of them were even talking and laughing with their friends. As for the first-year students who just entered the school, Bourne was still the first one here. It was not until the new students from Slytherin appeared one after another that he became less conspicuous. Because Slytherin's underground common room is near the banquet hall, it is very close, and because the students of this house always like to show pure blood etiquette to the other 3 houses, their new students are required by their prefects to do it every day. Attend meals on time. As expected, Draco Malfoy, a conspicuous person, walked into the banquet hall with Crabbe and Goyle, who had just returned from the hospital wing. However, when he saw Bourne, his eyes hesitated for a moment. At the same time, Bourne also saw them, so he waved his palms and said hello. Seeing this situation, Draco seemed to have made up his mind. He, Crabbe and Goyle walked around half of the banquet hall in order to pass by Bourne on the way. If. When passing by Bourne, Draco said in a very small voice, if you want to hear the term Slytherin's hero, don't impulsively, some people on the Quidditch team seem to be preparing to do something. After saying all this quickly, Draco immediately walked towards the table with food, as if nothing had happened just now. Chapter 34. In a magic school where there are no physical education classes but only flying classes, Quidditch is the only sport available to young wizards. The Quidditch teams of various colleges naturally absorb the young wizards with the best physical fitness in their respective colleges. In Slytherin, apart from Dean Snape and the students from the 20,8 pure blood families, the Slytherin Quidditch team is already vaguely the third pole of the entire academy. Even a young master like Draco Malfoy is not willing to antagonize those players. After all, after his 2nd year, he also aspired to join the Slytherin team as a seeker. This position was the focus of the Quidditch game, and the seeker who successfully caught the golden snitch would become the most handsome in the game. Damn, there's no such thing as that. Moreover, Draco's desire to become the Slytherin Quidditch seeker was also supported and affirmed by the old Malfoy. Speaking more broadly, being in the limelight will bring fame, and if fame works well, it can be transformed into influence. If coupled with wealth, it will become much easier for a person to solve certain things. The Malfoy family, who are so poor that they only have galleons left, and the richest oil tycoons in the world, who have a piece of cloth on their heads, actually have a lot in common in terms of their need for influence. What's more, speaking of youth, old Malfoy was also young, and he naturally knew that there would be hidden rewards for playing well at Quidditch. Priority in choosing a mate at Hogwarts, there was nothing you could do about it. British wizards were just that bad. Man, the Malfoy family wants to maintain the tradition of pure blood. If it is too late, even the daylily may be cold. Of course, because Draco and her mother Narcissa always talked about everything, Lucius had not yet taken the initiative to tell him about the benefits of playing Quidditch. But no matter what, he was willing to risk being ostracized by the senior Quidditch team members and secretly revealed to Bourne a little bit about the plan they plotted loudly in the common room last night. Draco told Bourne it's definitely affectionate and righteous. If it's Harry Potter, hey, just don't mention it. The kindness shown by Draco was also felt by Bourne. Even though he was not afraid of school bullying and even had a little expectation, Bourne still said thank you to Draco. The voice was neither too loud nor too quiet, just enough for the Malfoy trio to hear clearly but not enough for everyone in the banquet hall to hear. Draco, who was pretending to be walking away as if nothing had happened, paused for a moment after hearing this, and then pulled Crabbe and Goyle towards a staircase. What delicious food is available in the public cafeteria is just ordinary food prepared for students. On the first day of school, I will take you to see what kind of breakfast the house elves at Hogwarts will prepare for the professor. While drawing the pie, Draco took Crabbe and Goyle, who walked 2 steps and then looked back at the piles of butter-scented pies on the table, and quickly walked out of the banquet hall. And as soon as these 3 little groups left, the group of Quidditch bullies spoiled by Draco walked into the restaurant. There must have been their spies here before, because as soon as they entered, they found Bourne and got straight to the point. Yo, yo, yo. Walking up to Bourne, Marcus Flint, who had had a little friction with him on the train, immediately transformed into a rapper and started provocatively, "This is not the guy who single-handedly dunked Gryffindor. The little wizard who got 250 points? Why did you come to the dining room for breakfast alone? Didn't you make any friends in the dormitory? Are the Gryffindors starting to exclude you? It doesn't matter, they don't treat you as a friend, we Slytherins don't do that. After all." As he spoke, the Slytherin Quidditch captain, who somewhat resembled an orangutan, paused, grinned, revealing an impressive set of protruding buck teeth, and turned his head to wink at his teammates. The players on the Slytherin team smiled knowingly and all said, "You are the hero of Slytherin, ha 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 ha." However, it was obvious that he was being teased. Instead of getting angry on the spot, Bourne nodded as if in recognition. "Hey, that's what Draco just said. There's nothing wrong with them saying that." Bourne thought to himself. "Isn't it true? Let Gryffindor bear 250 points at the beginning of the year, arsenic for him, honey for me. From a logical point of view, this title of Hero of Slytherin is indeed worthy. Well deserved." However, Bourne's nod of approval made Marcus and the others confused. Originally, they planned to make the little wizard in front of them become a crybaby and embarrass themselves in public. With this kind of dark history, the next 7 years of Hogwarts, or to be more precise, in Gryffindor Barbarian House, where courage is respected, will probably be a difficult life for this little wizard. Of course, it would be fine if the little wizard didn't get angry and cry. They also designed a plan B for this. They felt that in that case, the little wizard must have wanted to fight back because he couldn't save his face. This is even better. The more Bourne resisted, the more excited they became. At that time, they can also take the opportunity to one-on-one with Bourne as a group, and then let the little wizard experience the various martial arts skills used in Quidditch matches. But with their IQs, even if they work together and come up with Plan A and Plan B, they are already performing at a high level. Bourne's nod of approval directly caused the Slytherin Quidditch players to collectively break through the defense. There are such shameless people. This majestic Gryffindor can actually lie down and be in a state of disrepair. Marcus Flint couldn't hold himself any longer, so he reached out and swept away Bourne's dinner plate. The broken plate made a crisp sound, and the fried eggs, steaks and some baked potato pieces contained in it were scattered around on the ground. Scattered. Boy! Just listen to me. Although he had seen some of Bourne's hands-on abilities when he was on the train, he was just a person at that time. But now, they have an entire Quidditch team with substitutes, and this little wizard has shown a tendency to follow his heart, so Marcus feels that it won't be a big deal if he goes too far. If this little stimulus makes Bourne angry and takes action, wouldn't they just re-implement Plan B? The plan goes through. However, just when Marcus was complacent about his wit, something unexpected happened to everyone once again. Bourne did take action, yes. However, the way he acted was actually a bit terrifying, as if he was not breaking out in silence, but becoming perverted in silence. In sync with Marcus's action of sweeping down a plate of food, Bourne picked up the fork placed on the dining table and without looking, thrust it into Marcus' big hand before he could take it away from the table. Den! With the sound of metal carving into wood, the double-headed fork stood upright on the long table in the restaurant. The Slytherin Quidditch players, including Marcus, were stunned. Perhaps because of his slow reaction, or perhaps he was simply frightened, Marcus finally let out a scream after a second or two. Ah! Chapter 35. The Transfiguration classroom is on the 3rd floor of the castle. There are windows on both sides of the oval classroom. Looking out from the windows, you can see the lush tree crown. 6 huge bird cages placed in pairs, seemingly for peacocks, and some smaller cages are the biggest feature of this classroom with a simple decoration style. Although they are all empty, with so many types of bird cages placed together, it is difficult not to suspect that Professor McGonagall, who uses this classroom to teach classes on the Transfiguration spell, is a bird lover. 2 blackboards stood at the end of the classroom like 2 screens. Together with the globes placed next to them, they guarded a thick red oak podium. At this time, a tabby cat with dark stripes was squatting on this podium, looking exactly like those cat owners who like to stand at high places at home and look down on their own country. When Bourne walked into the classroom with a plate of food, the tabby cat glanced at him and purred dissatisfiedly in his throat. Realizing that he had done something wrong, Bourne laughed twice and quickly put the food and plates on the desk next to him. "How do you bring food into the classroom?" Hermione, the little witch who had already sat in the first row of the classroom and had even previewed the teaching materials for a while, turned her head and looked at Bourne. Miss Beaver had a rather serious look on her face. She said in a tone that was full of regret and anger, "Although as a witness, I understand that you cannot be entirely blamed for the accident that happened on the train, but you should remember that our Gryffindor team is now in the negative. I deliberately read the history of Hogwarts last night. In the past 10 years, the most points gained by a Gryffindor in a single school year was 230 house points. The person who set this record was Ron's brother Bill Weasley. If everything goes well, I mean, if our freshmen work hard together, it is not impossible to offset the minus 250 points disadvantage at the beginning with the extra points gained. In addition to working hard to gain extra points for the college, we must also try to minimize or even completely avoid continued deductions. For example, if Professor McGonagall sees your behavior of bringing food to the classroom, he might deduct points from us." To be honest, there is nothing wrong with Hermione, the little witch. It's just that her tone when speaking was not very friendly, and she seemed a bit arrogant and defiant. Fortunately, Bourne is not the type to argue just for the sake of arguing. He is a very reasonable person. In addition, Hermione didn't know, but he was like a mirror in his heart. Professor McGonagall was watching from the podium not far away. Sorry, I promise there won't be a next time." Just when Bourne was about to pass the test, 2 running little wizards rushed into the Transfiguration classroom at the same time. They ran directly to Bourne and sat down next to him. "Harry, we almost got lost just now. Fortunately, we met George and Fred, who pointed out the location of the Transfiguration classroom to us. They also told us that you made a big fuss in the banquet hall not long ago and even brought Snape to his knees." The professor was shocked. Ron, who had caught his breath, also interjected, "They said you placed a curse on Marcus Flint." After Professor Snape left, Marcus was so frightened that he wet his pants in public. Both George and Fred were feeling sorry. They said that if they hadn't gotten up late today, they would definitely help you beat up those Slytherin guys. Also, they want us to talk to you and meet together after class today. They want to learn that curse from you. Bourne, can you also teach me and Harry when the time comes?" While he was talking, he saw the food on the table, so he immediately gave Bourne a thumbs up, probably meaning "I'm really reliable." However, before Ron could say anything else, Bourne quickly took a preemptive strike, picked up a piece of pumpkin pie on the plate and stuffed it into Ron's mouth at lightning speed, blocking this unfair roommate. The mouth of Yu. At the same time, Bourne did not forget about Harry, and used a piece of pudding cake to interrupt the latter's about to be spoken words. Rain and dew all belong to it. After taking care of these 2 teammates, Bourne secretly looked at an older cat girl on the podium who was about to explode, and then ignored Miss Beaver, who was looking at him angrily with wide eyes, and then quickly said, I'm not, don't talk nonsense." He first expressed his attitude with a wave of denials, and then continued to explain. "First, I just reasoned with Marcus and the others, there was absolutely no fighting. Second, Professor Snape did not deduct points from Gryffindor at that time, so stop talking nonsense, I am the victim. Third, I didn't put a curse on Marcus. Even if he was really frightened and peed, it was because he had a physical problem and he should go to Madame Pomfrey. If that didn't work, just go to St. Mungo's. I swear on the name of Merlin that these 3 things I said are all true." "Well, I swear on Merlin's name, there is nothing wrong with saying that." After saying that, Bourne sat upright, looking forward, with an innocent temperament. Harry and Ron swallowed the food in their mouths with difficulty, and were about to ask more questions, but the scene that happened on the podium made them open their mouths wide, and they were unable to say a word. The tabby cat jumped down from the podium and began to transform in mid-air, turning into Professor McGonagall wearing a slim wizard robe in a dazzling manner. This form transformation process was so smooth that some sharp-eyed little wizards even discovered that the circles around the tabby cat's eyes had now turned into a pair of glasses worn on the bridge of Professor McGonagall's nose. Professor McGonagall glanced at Bourne, Harry, and Ron, who were sitting in a row. With one look, the two boys who were chatting with each other immediately became like the good students around them. They sat down obediently and straightly. "Put your food away. You are not allowed to bring your own food in my class." Professor McGonagall is a strict and smart witch. The first lesson gave the students in the class a big shock. But at the same time, Professor McGonagall is also a very principled professor, and he never likes to punish people without teaching like some guys who are just teachers. Also, does anyone know why food can't appear in the Transfiguration classroom? Bourne raised his hand weakly. Professor McGonagall motioned for him to answer. There are 5 major exceptions to Gamp's law of transformation, one of which is food. Simply put, food cannot be directly transformed using magic. If the food transformed by transformation is eaten by someone, it will be destroyed when the transformation time is over. When it encounters some other situations, it will immediately return to its prototype. For example, if you turn a stone into a honey cake, you will eventually have an extra stone in your stomach after eating it. Therefore, it is best not to eat anything in the Transfiguration classroom. By analogy, it is best not to bring food into the Transfiguration classroom. Mr. Slughorn, if you know this, why do you still make mistakes? Because of your mistake, Gryffindor House will be deducted 3 points. As for Potter and Weasley who are talking about eating, since it is your first offense and you are unaware, no points will be deducted for just verbal criticism, but you must remember that there will never be a next time. Chapter 36. After being called into the office by Professor McGonagall, the executive vice principal of Hogwarts first gave Bourne a piece of parchment and asked him to bring it back here on Saturday morning, and then made himself a cup of black tea. The next class is Charms. The classroom is on the 4th floor of the castle. Professor McGonagall sipped some tea and moistened her throat. "You know what to do, right? Listen carefully and take some notes if necessary." Bourne replied honestly. He had already noticed that the black tea was not his own. Professor McGonagall put down the teacup and said seriously, "The key point is not to go to the right corridor on the 4th floor. Principal Dumbledore declared it a restricted area last night. Mr. Slughorn, you have to remember that we, Gryffindor, my college points are still negative." Well, when it comes to house points, Professor McGonagall's name for Bourne changes back to Mr. Slughorn. After repeatedly assuring the dean that he would not take the initiative to cause trouble, Bourne left the office as if he was running away. When he ran into the Charms classroom, Professor Flitwick was about to start class. The professor, who was said to have a bit of goblin blood, was already standing on top of a stack of thick books. So Bourne quickly bowed to the professor, found a seat nearby and sat down. As promised to Professor McGonagall, Bourne behaved very honestly in this Charms class. After all, he felt that the professor's animagus form was definitely not used for playing and eating dried fish. A random check of the student's status during class showed that the cat that walked up and down and had an agile body was definitely top-notch. Good job. He just made a promise, and he didn't want to have a cat's current crime. Therefore, Bourne decisively refused the quiet greetings from his 2 rival roommates and ran to them without moving his seat. Professor Flitwick is a very capable teacher. Or to be more precise, the vast majority of teachers at Hogwarts actually have very high teaching standards. They will never be like some teachers who just read PPT dryly in class, and maybe they didn't even make the PPT themselves. The little wizards listened with great interest. By the end of the class, they had basically learned the spell Open the Illajo Cave and learned that the Latin meaning of this spell is Friend of the Thief. Even after class, there are still some students who are still practicing this spell with their wands with undiminished enthusiasm. There are 2 young wizards in Hufflepuff House, Justin Finch-Fletchley and Ernie Macmillan. I don't know what they were thinking, but they actually made an Illajo hole towards each other. The key is that after casting the spell, they both stood up at the same time, patting this, looking at that. Finally, they lifted up the wizard's robes and discovered that the spell they had just fired at random actually worked. Then, the 2 young wizards turned around at the speed of light and zipped up the front door of their pants. Seeing their funny behavior, the little wizards who were watching all laughed. However, similarly, most of the little wizards among the bystanders also showed expressions of curiosity and eagerness to try. For example, Ron and Harry. Just when they were about to cheer each other up, Ms. Beaver next to her suddenly stood up a thick copy of Standard Spells, Elementary, banged it on the table, and then put the book under her arm. Shaking her fluffy hair and walking towards the classroom door. "Stupid boy! Ron, I feel like she's scolding us." "Harry, be confident and leave out the you feel." Two good brothers flirted together, for a few seconds. Then, they picked up their wands at the same time and chanted the Open the Ilaho-hole spell to each other, and then the two of them laughed together again. "Where's Bourne? Let's go find him and try," Ron suggested to Harry. However, when they looked up and looked around for Bourne, their little friend had actually left the classroom first. Even when they returned to the common room after lunch, neither of them saw Bourne. The question is, where did Bourne go? The answer is, after exiting the door of the Charms classroom, Bourne encountered the Weasley brothers. The two of them used a double-team tactic commonly used in Quidditch matches, and took Bourne out of the Charms classroom in an almost strongman-locked manner. After going around in circles, passing through an outdoor corridor that no one usually passed, and then walking down a flight of stairs, the two took Bourne to the second floor of the castle. The reason why Bourne was willing to come with them was not only because they brought him lunch, 2 stuffed burgers and a few scones, but also because they mentioned an acquaintance of Bourne. "Brother Sherlock. Have you arrived?" Facing a landscape painting hanging on the wall, the two brothers took turns calling. Soon, a familiar figure jumped into the painting from outside the frame, riding a white horse that he didn't know where it came from. Fred raised an eyebrow at Bourne. "Good afternoon, little Bourne," and 2 little brothers George and Fred. Jumping off the horse, Sherlock greeted the 3 little wizards respectively. "George, he can tell us apart. Better than Mom." The 2 happy people said happily. They met last night. Even on their first day back at school and attending the freshman dinner, the 2 brothers did not give up their jobs. That night, the 2 sneaked out of the Gryffindor lounge on time as before and started their night tour. However, the 2 of them, who have always been lonely in night travel, encountered an unexpected new opponent this time. A portrait of someone who couldn't sleep in the middle of the night because he was bored, and at the same time had the observation attribute fully selected. Even though they know all the secret passages in the castle, and even have a map hanging, the twins still can't get rid of the habit of running from one painting to another, and constantly looking for the old guard at Hogwarts. Filch called Sherlock. After trying again and again, he still couldn't get rid of the twins being tracked by Detective Sia, so he decisively changed to another position. "Brother, please let me go. If you can't beat it, join." The twins immediately knelt down to the boss, and then cried and begged Sherlock to accept them as his younger brothers. It would be best to pass them on the core tracking and counter-tracking techniques. Being able to open a summer camp for little wizards who have not gone to school, although on the one hand it is to make money to support themselves, on the other hand it also shows that Sherlock has some educational feelings. In addition, as soon as he arrived at Hogwarts, Dr. Watson found the organization, and other ghosts always gathered together and played happily. This made Sherlock very unhappy, and even made him feel like he was about to become a lonely old man. Otherwise, he would not have so boringly agreed to Filch to help him catch those little wizards who wandered at night. However, the twins made demands and Sherlock himself had demands, and the 2 parties immediately hit it off and established a new alliance. The third-year Gryffindors only had 1 class this morning. After class, the twins went to learn skills from their newly recognized eldest brother. Forgetting to eat and sleep is a waste of time. Chapter 37. What are you looking at? George and Fred replied in unison, "Peeves, he is following Professor Quirrel, and he is still invisible." With that said, they pointed it out to Bourne. Sure enough, on the Marauders map, there was another name not far behind Professor Quirrel. Moreover, there was a parenthesis next to the name, with the words invisible status written in small letters. "George, in a sense, Peeves is the ancestor of all our pranks and night walks. It gave us a lot of inspiration," Fred said. George continued, "As early as the 1st grade, when we met him on night outing, as long as we would call him Uncle Peeves, he would probably let us go and run to inform Filch without making any noise. But in the 2nd grade, this probability dropped sharply. We still fawned over him, but 8 times out of 10 he would tip Filch off. Maybe this trick won't work at all this year." The twins looked at each other and shrugged at the same time, with helpless expressions on their faces. "That's it. Just when his thoughts almost went astray, Bourne, who had already realized something was wrong, forced it to straighten again. Speaking of which, isn't the more important thing now to follow Professor Quirrel and find out the secret of his repeated visits to this abandoned girl's bathroom? A word to wake up the dreamer. The Weasley twins immediately realized the problem and hurriedly looked at the Marauder's map. At this time, Professor Quirrel and Peeves had already walked into the abandoned girl's bathroom. We chase. George just wanted to catch up and take a look, but he hadn't finished his words yet. Including Bourne, the three little wizards heard a scream of ouch coming from the bathroom, and the scream even had a long sound. Bourne secretly opened a crack in the closed curtains and looked out, only to see a black figure flash past his eyes in a whoosh. It is worth mentioning that this black figure is not completely black, black robe, black pants, black shoes, but there is a thick purple scarf wrapped around his head. It's Professor Quirrel, that's right. And the reason why he turned into lightning happened to be that purple scarf. At this time, it was burning like a torch with blazing flames and billowing smoke. Bourne's eyes were very sharp, and even through the flickering firelight, he still saw something hanging on the purple turban. My mark of purity. He recognized it at a glance as the practice work he had done in the Transfiguration class not long ago. At this time, it is also burning. Bourne was stunned. However, he immediately realized what he had to do, and he didn't care about the child's games such as sneaking or not. He jumped down from the windowsill and clenched his hands into fists in front of his chest. The Emperor's will be burned, and the cave will destroy the monsters. Even if I have nothing, I still have to give my life. Striving for excellence will last until death. But while he was reciting proverbs, Peeves suddenly appeared in the corridor, pointing at him and laughing non-stop. There was a little wizard who was frightened, Peeves said happily. He actually imitated the fat monk and started chanting, ha ha ha. Frustrated by Bourne's unknown behavior, the twins had no choice but to jump off the windowsill, lift the curtains and walk out. Seeing Peeves, the two brothers immediately looked like they were seeing an acquaintance. Isn't this Mr. Peeves? What are you doing here? Perhaps because the prank was successful, he was in a good mood at this time, and he received genuine flattery from the Weasley twins, so Peeves answered their questions quite generously. It turned out that after being burned by the purity mark in the Transfiguration classroom, the first person he thought of as the prankster was Professor Quirrel. He thinks this year's Quirrel is strange. Just like the Holy Roman Empire, neither holy nor Roman, nor an empire. Quirrel, who returned to teach at Hogwarts, not only became stammering when speaking, but was also always careful to avoid anyone appearing behind him. When people spoke to him, he would always startle and look like a cornered prairie dog. Quirrel was not like this when he was a Muggle studies lecturer. Although he explained that this was due to the stress reaction caused by a vampire attack while traveling in Romania. But Peeves didn't believe it. I guess someone must have put a vicious curse on him, and the medium might be the scarf he just started wearing this year. You set a professor's head on fire just because of suspicion. Fred said in surprise. After saying that, he glanced at George, as if to say, did you hear, you can still play like this. What's the point? Besides, if I guess right, then I'm doing this professor a big favor. If I guess wrong, I'm also helping Quirrel face his own fears. How ridiculous. He actually said that stuff the garlic scarf can protect him, didn't you hear? He didn't stutter when he screamed, maybe my prank will cure all his diseases. After saying that, Peeves laughed unscrupulously again, ha 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 ha. You are right. After concluding the simplified prayer ceremony, Bourne agreed with what Peeves had just said. Hey, you rude brat, you should call me Mr. Peeves. The only thing that people should be afraid of is actually the emotion of fear itself. So, are you ready to face your fears? Bastard. Bourne suddenly raised his wand. All petrified. All petrified. All petrified. Because Bourne has only been exposed to one offensive spell so far, he can only use it. And because Peeves was beeping blindly on the side, interrupting his prayer ceremony to the great emperor, he resented it and fired 3 petrified shots in a row. As for whether this curse would mutate like it did on the Hogwarts Express, the angry Bourne could no longer care. 3 grey magic rays blocked Peeves' escape route from 3 angles. And when they hit this strange spirit, as expected, they all turned into blazing plasma again. Although the form of all petrified has changed, the effect is not bad, and it has even become much stronger. After being hit by the first curse, Peeves' body immediately stiffened and remained suspended in the air with an exaggerated body movement. After being hit by the second spell, it was like putting on an invisible straitjacket, and Peeves' short, fat body seemed to have shrunk by several sizes. And when the third curse hit the target, Peeves actually showed a phenomenon that would only occur if he was subject to a real petrification curse, like a stone being crushed under a hydraulic press. Large areas of cracks appeared on his body. Road. Not only that, there were actually golden snakes dancing wildly between those cracked lines, and the electric snakes kept cracking and exploding. Chapter 38. After sending away the Weasley twins, Bourne walked into the abandoned girls' bathroom alone. This must be the entrance to the secret room, Bourne thought silently as he glanced at the row of brass faucets stained with patina as he passed the sink. Quirrel dares to come here at this time. He must have checked clearly. Ghost Myrtle must not be here at this time. When investigating what Quirrel is doing here, with the help of the plot, Bourne actually already has a logical reasoning. The reasoning comes to an end and comes to an end naturally. Moreover, that was not the main reason why he volunteered to break up with the Weasley brothers. The real reason is, he has a habit that when doing certain important things, he must and can only be alone. Walking to the windowsill of the bathroom, he looked at the blue sky. The afternoon sunlight shone on Bourne through the glass window. I was really slacking off a little bit before. Breathing out a deep breath, Bourne finally calmed down his restless heart after witnessing the manifestation of the impurity mark. It took some time, but it doesn't matter, I already understand what I have to do next. Matter. Just like a student who has taken the exam of real variable function or random process with great fear, and after handing in the paper, most normal people will want to pick up snacks and use means such as chasing numbers, opening black cards, etc., to carry out heavy damage to the brain cells. Rescue. It's like a social worker working overtime for a week in a row. After finally getting through to Friday, when he gets home, he always has the urge to order takeout, hold his cell phone, and then lie down on the sofa until next Monday. From the dark universe of Warhammer to the heavenly world of Harry Potter, Bourne inevitably falls. Of course, this has something to do with the fact that he is only an 11-year-old child now. But it wasn't until he began to face this problem squarely that he realized that it had been a long time since he had thought and acted like an Astartes. Only on those rare occasions when he transformed into the Astartes Magus was there a hint of the space marine he had served for the past 300 years. In the past 11 years, although he had played with simple chain swords and bolters, these were more about making figures that he found interesting than looking for loyal fighting partners. In the past, he might have been able to use transmigration as an excuse. But just after seeing the mark of purity burning on Quirrel's head, Bourne immediately realized that he might still be watched by that great being. Isn't a world like Harry Potter a prototype of the utopia in the eyes of that being? Only by not mentioning any illusory big plans and doing something down to earth can he be worthy of this journey. Can't slack off anymore. Set a small goal first, Bourne said firmly in his heart, since the mark of purity has appeared and marked the blasphemer for me, then that Voldemort is my first prey. As for how to hunt, when Bourne began to think like an Astartes, he immediately listed 3 possible options. First, follow the plot and use plot killing to kill that guy. But that would take another 7 years. And such a long time is usually enough for the Astartes to conquer several planets. Bourne also wants to save face. Therefore, although this plan was feasible, it was ruled out by him first. There are only 2 remaining options. We need to do an experiment first before we can make a decision. Thinking of this, Bourne quickly walked out of the bathroom and raced against time to find an experimental object hidden in the castle. Not everyone is like Bourne, who soberly reflects on themselves once a problem is discovered and quickly finds a path for iterative upgrades. As for people with character flaws, it is generally better to blame others than to reflect on themselves. Even if they know clearly in their hearts, always doing this will make it difficult for them to make progress, and there is a high probability that they will encounter misfortune one after another in the future. For example, a defense against the dark arts professor who just got up from the wet ground. It's all Peeves' fault. If he hadn't used some alchemy tools he found from nowhere to attack me, I wouldn't have suffered this crime today. It's all God's damn fault, Harry Potter. If it weren't for this little brat, I wouldn't have had to risk going to that bathroom, and naturally I wouldn't have met that bastard Peeves. And that old bee. If I hadn't believed his lie, that professors of defense against the dark arts have better salaries and brighter career prospects than lecturers of Muggle studies, I wouldn't have risked going to Albania. Study tour. And those who treat me as a slave. The last object of Quirrel's complaint only flashed through his mind, and he did not dare to think deeply about it. The Dark Lord is hiding in his body, and since he can possess him, he might also be able to read his thoughts. Looking at the whip with barbs on the desk in the office, Quirrel's body trembled violently. He just complained so much, but he never thought about if he hadn't submitted a promotion application report to the principal because of his conceited talent, there is a high probability that Dumbledore would have openly recruited a defense against the dark arts professor from the Wizarding Society in order to find a powerful wizard. If he hadn't been tempted to spend money to watch the Vampire Female Bartenders Storm Up program when he was traveling in Albania, he wouldn't have been thrown into the dark forest after being tricked and became Voldemort's prey. If he hadn't become greedy for all kinds of dark magic knowledge, he could have returned to Hogwarts as soon as possible to seek help from Dumbledore, and remove the unstable possession when Voldemort was extremely weak. And the reason why he repeatedly ran to the abandoned girl's bathroom was actually because he believed what Voldemort told him, there was something there that could help him quickly learn Parseltongue. What should I do? After finding a chair and sitting down, Quirrel secretly wondered, can I turn back now? With a timid personality, he quietly retreated in his heart after experiencing the previous encounter in which he didn't actually suffer much besides pain. Because he was lost in thought, he didn't notice that the scary face on the back of his head that always talked to him when he was alone had not taken the initiative to give him any orders for several minutes. Likewise, he did not notice that the tip of the alder wand he held in his hand was pointed at himself. The various negative emotions surging in his mind have become black threads, and are being absorbed bit by the wand without leaving a trace. In a place that cannot be seen with the naked eye, the core of the wand, which is made of unicorn tail hair, has absorbed too much of this substance, so it is gradually turning black and losing its original luster. Idiot, a little more, a little more. Voldemort, who was possessed by Quirrel, secretly shouted in his heart. The various negative emotions of the host are nothing less than a great tonic for him in this state. Chapter 39. Professor Quirrel. Filch greeted Quirrel as he stood at the door of his office. His grinning look startled Quirrel, who almost gave him a Nevada Na as a meeting gift. You, what's going on? Filch's forehead turned red, and he sniffed before answering. I'm fine, Professor Quirrel. Principal Dumbledore asked me to tell you to go to the principal's office immediately. Also, I caught 2 troublemakers at the door of your office. As he spoke, he kept raising his arms and then took them back. Only then did Quirrel see that the Hogwarts caretaker was holding a young wizard by the collar in one hand. It turned out that he had just knocked on the door with his forehead. Professor, do you want to deduct some college points from these 2 brats? Who knows if they want to throw a few big dung eggs at the door of your office? Filch blinked with an expectant look on his face. I'm fine, Quirrel pretended to be submissive, his face turned slightly pale, and he waved his hands and said, also, I know what Dumbledore wants to find me, so I'm going out now. After speaking, Quirrel walked out, not forgetting to close the office door at the same time. Excuse me, I borrowed it. He leaned sideways, leaning against the wall, carefully passing by Filch and the Weasley twins, and then strode towards the stairs at the corner of the corridor. In fact, there is a gargoyle sculpture on the corner of the corridor on the 3rd floor where his office is located. As long as you know the secret word, you can take the automatic spiral staircase hidden behind it and directly reach the principal's office on the 8th floor of the castle. However, since Dumbledore didn't tell him, Quirrel could only pretend not to know. When Quirrel walked away, Filch murmured, "Oh, anyone can be a professor now," and forcefully dragged the twins out of the corridor. But he didn't know that Professor Quirrel, whom he despised, cast a protective spell on the door when it was closed. If someone wants to break in secretly while he is away, whether by physical means or by casting a Joe open on the door, they will be suddenly attacked by a rune snake that is transformed into a doorknob by the transformation spell. Casting such a spell and completing it in an instant without any sound or wand is not something that just any wizard can do. Hurrying to the 8th floor of the castle, when Quirrel walked into the principal's office, Dumbledore had already asked the house elves to prepare black tea and some refreshments for him. "Quirinus, sit down quickly, don't be formal, I invited you here just to talk about something," Dumbledore said with a smile. At this time, he was wearing a grey wizard robe and looked like a figure from the classical era. Quirrel sat down in front of the principal's desk tremblingly, with his butt only occupying a quarter of the stool. He was a little worried that Dumbledore was going to ask him about his visit to the abandoned women's bathroom just now, because he had to do it. Tell a series of lies. And lying to Dumbledore. Quirrel took a peek at a set of exquisite silver alchemy tools that were spitting out clouds of mist on the edge of the desk. Quirrel didn't think that the thing was just a humidifier. However, the good news is that when Dumbledore spoke, Quirrel knew that the principal just wanted to ask him about the teaching plan for defense against the dark arts classes in each grade. However, the bad news is that this topic belongs to children without mothers. It would be a long story to talk about. After chatting for several hours, it was almost dinner time when this unexpected leadership conversation came to an end. Dumbledore nodded with satisfaction and showed an approving smile. Very good, Quirinus, you have done a really good job. The teaching in the upper grades is mainly focused on fighting curses and jinxes, while the teaching in the middle and lower grades is more focused on fighting black magic. Magical creatures. This course design is very similar to the teaching model of the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor at Hogwarts when I was still a teaching staff. Quirrel's heart skipped a beat, his back was soaked instantly, and sweat was even dripping from the back of his head. It seems that you did gain a lot from your previous study tour in the Dark Forest of Albania. It all depends on your support, Principal. Quirrel stuttered. Dumbledore shook his head. That's all the result of your own efforts, he continued. It's almost dinner time now. You young people are prone to hunger, so I, an old man, won't keep you here. Goodbye, Quirinus. Quirrel stood up and bowed slightly to Principal Dumbledore. Then, he didn't even turn around, but backed away a little bit and exited the principal's office door. At this time, the portraits on the wall that had been suppressed for a long time also began to talk about it. These former principals who had passed away were obviously divided into two camps. Some of them felt that Quirrel's answer was okay. Although his performance was a bit restrained, he could not hide his talent. Moreover, judging from what he just said, this person is probably qualified for the Defense Against Dark Arts position. But the opposite camp believed that Quirrel's character was too weak. Finally, his behavior of retreating out of the principal's office was even more like a jester or a court jester. In Defense Against the Dark Arts course, the key is not dark magic but defense. If the teacher's character is too weak, how can he teach students who dare to resist and defend themselves in times of crisis? What's interesting is that those who support Quirrel are mostly headmasters from Gryffindor and Hufflepuff. On the contrary, the former headmasters who don't care about Quirrel are actually from Slytherin and Ravenclaw. Mostly. Such as, this guy is just like a pewter gun. He can't get hard at all. What can the little wizard learn from him? Phineas Black, considered by many to be the most unpopular headmaster, twirled his goatee with his fingertips, while expressing his distrust of Quirrel. Delise Devant, who graduated from Ravenclaw and was the principal of Hogwarts and the chief healer of St. Mungo's, was also not optimistic about the future of her junior disciple. This old witch with long silver curly hair and always a kind face was frowning at this time, and the worried expression on her face was not concealed at all. Albus, I think you need to reconsider. She said, Quirinus is indeed a very talented young man, but I think he is actually more suitable to be a scholar who specializes in research. Teaching in person if so, after all, this course has been cursed by that person, and it is difficult for anyone to be able to teach in this position for a full year safely. Almost every former principal expressed their own opinions on Quirrel. Although they may not necessarily adopt it completely, previous Hogwarts principals will actually respect the wisdom of these predecessors when making some decisions about the school. Just like this time, the portraits of the two camps were debated until the end, and even some of the principals who originally came to see Kylo were drawn into the camp. If we follow the usual practice, the current principal should obey the majority and find another Defense Against the Dark Arts professor. But the current principal is Dumbledore. The greatest white wizard of our time is different from what many people imagine. He is actually not a fan of the so-called disciplined decision-making system. Chapter 40. If you eat too much instant noodles, you will always find that there is no ingredient package after opening it. If you shop online too much, you will always encounter the dilemma of going out to pick up express delivery and forget to take the key. If you fall in love too much, you will always meet a bad guy or a bad girl. What is going to come will come. On Wednesday morning, the first-year Gryffindor wizards had their first Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson in their lives. This is the course that all the little wizards are most looking forward to. Even Ron, who habitually wants to faint when he sees a book, actually previewed the textbook in advance. Dark Magic, A Guide to Self-Defense. On the way to class, Ron kept chattering about his plan to his roommates. Maybe it's due to inertia, or maybe it's just a natural incompatibility. Ever since they met Malfoy and the others on the train, the relationship between the Harrow duo and each other has been avalanche. They hate each other, no one hates them the most. Only more annoying. Bourne did not join in the quarrel among the children. He was thinking about his own business as he walked. In order to take this defense against the dark arts course, he had made some preparations, and even carried the red iron tool box. He was afraid that when school violence really happened, he would not have the tools at hand. However, when the little wizards walked into the defense against the dark arts classroom with great interest, they almost thought they had gone to the wrong place. Obviously the classroom was on the third floor of the castle, and it was a sunny morning. The classroom that should have been bright and bright turned out to be as dark as a basement. Not only were the curtains drawn, but there were actually wooden boards nailed to the windows, and large pieces of wall covering were peeling off the surrounding walls. The tables and chairs used by the little wizard were all in tatters, and it was doubtful whether they would fall apart immediately after sitting on them. In such a large classroom, only a few candles were lit for lighting. It is hard not to wonder whether Professor Quirrel, who decorated the classroom, opened an optical shop as a side job to support his family. Even more unbearable is the smell in the classroom. The strong smell of garlic hit the little wizard's young nose like a fist, and it was also very spicy to the eyes. Having found their seats, in addition to students like Bourne who came to class with a clear purpose, and Miss Know-It-All, who has already become famous in Gryffindor, and even the entire first grade, in 2 days, she is immersed in previewing even if they had already previewed the textbook. Most of the other little wizards covered their noses with their hands and started chattering in low voices. Ron rubbed his index finger on the table, then extended his dirty finger to Harry for a look. "My confidence in this class is a little low," he said. Both George and Fred said that the defense against the dark arts class at Hogwarts has never been very good, and they actually told the truth this time. Maybe there's a chance, Harry could only comfort him. However, while he was talking, his hand touching the bottom of the chair seemed to come across something sticky. This caused him to waste a brand new piece of parchment. Neville, who was sitting next to them, kept his head down, rummaging around in his small school bag. In the end, this honest kid could only admit with a sad face, "I seem to have left my textbook in the dormitory." Seamus Finnegan advised him to be more open-minded. Anyway, given the current state of the defense against the dark arts classroom, Professor Quirrel's skills are probably not very good either. It doesn't matter whether there are books or not in class. "Look, I didn't bring any books with me." Seamus showed Neville the contents of his school bag. They were still filled with the textbooks used in Monday's class. He had been too lazy to change them for the past few days. "But the next class is potions, and you don't seem to have brought any potions textbooks." Neville reminded Seamus in a low voice, "Professor Snape is the head of Slytherin. I heard from the seniors, he will always find various reasons to deduct points from other colleges. Be careful." If the little lions' chats were somewhat related to this course, then the little badgers who were in class with them mostly focused on discussing Professor Quirrel, the teacher of the defense against the dark arts class. Their topic was sparked by a young wizard named Zacharias Smith, who was a descendant of a pure-blood family. Although there is no Smith family in the list of the Holy 20,8, after being assigned to Hufflepuff, he claimed that his family has a blood connection with the founder of the college. The Hufflepuff version of Malfoy belongs to Yes. However, the little badger was still innocent, so many freshmen truly believed what Zacharias said. "I'm telling you," because he was so enthusiastic about it, Zacharias actually sat down on the desk, put his feet on the chair, and said condescendingly to Justin and Macmillan, "Everyone at Hogwarts a professor receives a special allocation from the school board before the start of each school year to purchase teaching aids and improve teaching facilities. This year will be no exception. The classroom we are using now is so crude. In all likelihood, Professor Quirrel must have used the funds to do other things." Justin showed his talent for admiration and continued, "This is Hogwarts, the best magic school in the UK and even the world. How dare he do this?" Zacharias was very satisfied with the little brother's foreshadowing. He showed an expression of wisdom and excitedly expressed his inference. "There is only one truth. That Professor Quirrel was able to become the professor of defense against the dark arts must be because there is someone behind him." Bang! The reason for the dubbing was not because the wise kid spoke loudly, but simply because something actually hit the floor. Hearing the words "there is someone behind him" seemed to trigger a stress response. Professor Quirrel, who was walking out of the corridor connecting his office and the defense against the dark arts classroom with something in his arms, was suddenly startled and immediately reached for it. "Get the wand on your belt." The teaching aid he held in his hand, a round goldfish bowl, naturally fell to the ground and smashed to pieces. Many round rotten wood pieces contained in the fish tank all rolled towards the classroom and near the little wizards. What is this? Hannah Abbott, who was wearing 2 pigtails, looked down curiously and couldn't help but stretched out her wand to poke at the piece of rotten wood that stopped after hitting her shoes. This is true for Hufflepuff's little badger, not to mention the curious Gryffindor little lion. They don't even use wands but directly reach out to grab it. However, none of these freshmen seemed to have considered what classroom they were in or what class they were about to take. Hannah poked the piece of rotten wood with her wand, and it was like turning on a switch, and it immediately took off its disguise. It stretched out its camouflaged claws with fins on them. One end of the rotten wood was twisted, which is its head. If you look closely, you can see a triangular crack-shaped mouth, which is full of sharp edges. The teeth of... Don't move. Quirrel wanted to say something, but the long time of pretending had some impact on him, and now he still stutters even if he wants to speak normally. So he reminded him a step too late. The nimble little wizards woke up almost all the dormant rotten wood, that is, the swamp digs.